agenda. Everyone please check in. And if you'll all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Supervisor Powers.
O great Creator, be present with us who take counsel for the maintenance of and the mission of Winnebago County. Give us wisdom and understanding. Guide us to perceive what is right, and grant us both the courage to persevere and the grace to accomplish it. Finally, look with compassion upon all who, through addiction, have lost their health and freedom. Remove from them the fears that desert them. Strengthen them in the work of their recovery. Restore them to full health. And to those who care for them, give patient understanding and persevering love. Amen.
Recording in progress.
Could I have a motion for the adoption of the agenda? Motion by Supervisor Albrecht, seconded by Supervisor Cox. Correspondence.
Yes, you have one piece of correspondence tonight. It's a resolution from Sawyer County. It's for an advisory referendum regarding private funding of election administration. And this will be forwarded to the legislative committee, although I believe it's already been forwarded from other counties. So.
Thank you. At this time, anyone in the public wish to speak to the board on anything to do with Winnebago County may go ahead, state your name and address, and remember you have 2 minutes to speak to the board. Just hold on.
Supervisors. Kay Horan, 324 9th Street, Neenah, Wisconsin, and I am a supervisor for District 5. I just want to pass on a piece of information. There is a total eclipse of the moon on November the 8th between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. And I just wanted people to be aware in case they wanted to see it. It will not be happening again until 2394. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Paul Eisen, 1807 Brighton Beach Road, Fox Crossing. After serving on this county board since 2006, I have two pressing issues to address to the county executive and especially to the 16 new county board supervisors. Number one, all department organization charts have been eliminated from the executive budget for 2023, depriving the public and Winnebago These charts provide vital information that is relevant to understanding and overseeing county business. I call upon the administration to add these back to the budget document. I call upon the county board to resolve to direct administration to add these charts. Number two, throughout the whole 2023 budget document, there is no administration acknowledgement of the $33,390,918 ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act Fund money, or how it is planned to be used. The county board, as well as the public, deserve up-to-date information on this vital financial windfall. It would be wholly appropriate to resolve to add this vital information.
Thank you.
Good evening, Shauna Zestera, 1882 Clairville Road. I just wanted to mention that I'm interested in, because I'm interested in learning how to become a first responder someday. I was talking with another first responder in Nakaimai, another township, and she mentioned that first responders often do not get, the groups do not get the, funding the fire departments do. And I just wanted the ARPA committee to, consider the first responder sections of the townships when it comes to the different needs. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to talk to the board this evening? Anyone else wish to talk to the board this evening? Not hearing anyone else. Reports from committees, commissions, and boards. Anyone wishing committee, commissions, and boards this evening? Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have today submitted to the county clerk a resolution to name the county administration building in the honor of David Albrecht as the David Albrecht Administration Building, and this is a correspondence to be forwarded to the Facilities Management Committee.
Anyone else wishing to speak at this time? Anyone else? Not hearing any. I just have a few things tonight. Supervisors Conley will be a little bit late tonight. Supervisor Dowling will be late, and Supervisor Stafford will be late. And also, we just got notice that Supervisor Bain will be late, or maybe not even come tonight for unforeseen family reasons. So I want to let you know on that. And some of you that I know that will be here for a while, but then have got to leave tomorrow, just check out and come back in. This is open. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. So if you got to come back out or go back in, just check yourself in and out just regularly. So, but them are the only ones that let me know as of this evening. Okay, not seeing any questions. We will start off. The other thing I wanted to tell you is the county executive, John Damel, will be giving the board tonight his budget hearing. After that, County Executive Damel, he'll be turning this over to the board, and it'll be up to the board to do whatever they want with this. Approve it, pull it apart, pass certain parts of it, or whatever you want. So just so you know, so if you want to talk to County Executive Damel, now would be the time, because this will be his time. Otherwise, it'll be just like a regular board meeting. So if you have any questions on the whole budget, now's the time, because he won't be coming back and forth. Okay, County Executive Damel. Oops, somebody have a question? You want to go ahead and put your light on? You got to go ahead and call in. Supervisor Cox.
Chairman Egan, I would like to make a motion to accept the resolution 126-102-022 to adopt the 2023 annual budget for for Winnebago County.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Motion by Cox, seconded by Bender. You should all have gotten a copy here for resolution number 12610-2022. Adopt the 2023 annual budget for Winnebago County. Did you all see that? Should all been in your packets. Discussion. Any discussion? Any discussion? Okay, not seeing any discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
No.
Oops, I'm sorry.
No, you do the presentation.
Oh, we have to have a presentation, I'm sorry, it has to be a presentation. Well, that's what I thought. That's what I thought, Mr. Damel. Okay. I was really happy for you, I thought it was all over and done with.
I was really happy there myself.
County Executive Damel for the
All right.
presentation of the budget.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to the 2023 budget presentation. The budget process began in May and June as the finance team this year, Mike Collard and Carol Blackmore and myself, set flat levy targets for all of our departments. This meant departments were to look not to increase the tax levy by more than they were allocated in 2022. The theme for this year's budget is about our people, our citizens, and our employees. On the cover are pictures of the first employee appreciation event we've had in decades. This budget invests money for employees' events such as the Family Night, employee recognition throughout the year and during retirement, employee training and career development, employee raises, and about $2 million in contingency to fund the wage and compensation study. My goal in 2023 is to pay our employees a fair wage for their work and do the little things that show our appreciation for them. The levy increasing the allowable net new. The levy is increasing by the allowable net new construction minus $250,000. This means, in theory, that the tax bill for new buildings coming in on the tax roll is the amount we can raise the county levy. Remember, the operating levy is about 40% of the total revenue of the county. The vast majority of our county's budget is revenue from the state and federal government. This is because the county administers the mandates of the federal and state government. Overall, the tax rate is decreasing. This is largely caused by property value increases. This means that if your home has been assessed higher, there will not be a county tax increase for you. There is a lot to go through in this county budget, and I ask that you think programmatically rather than line by line. Each department has basic sections: revenue, labor, training and travel, capital outlay, office, operating, repairs and maintenance, and contractual services. Looking at it line by line or object code by object code does not tell the full story, and you may see some big increases or decreases depending on department. Over the next few days, we will do our best to provide you as much information as possible. I've asked each department to present the purpose and the goals of their department. Additionally, I have asked them to explain how their goals are achieved through this budget and any significant changes that are proposed. Before we get too far into the budget presentation, I'd like to ask Mike Collard to spend some time discussing the components of our budget and how this budget session will go.
Thank you, Executive Damel. I just want to take a few minutes here to give an overview, if you will, of the budget document, what its major components are, maybe a few tips on what to look for as we're going through it, just in terms of structurally, what kind of things are included, and that's really it. And for those of you who have been on the board a while, you can read a book or something if it's too boring for you, because it's going to be fairly basic. But with all the new members, I thought it would be useful to get just some basic ideas out in front of you as a discussion. So what are we here for? The budget. It's a big, thick book. Why do we do this? Why do we bother printing all this material and go through what we go through? There are a lot of platitudes you can read about the budget being a policy document, and certainly one of the most important pieces of legislation you'll pass this year, although you just passed it on a voice vote with no changes, but that's not really what we're doing. We're going to be here for a while looking at these things. So what is the purpose of a budget? I wanted to start out with. A county budget is a little bit different from other kinds of budgets you may have worked with in other organizations or contexts. You may have a budget for your personal expenses. You may have a budget for a business. You may have a budget for a lot of other things you've worked with. I would say that kind of budget is primarily a planning document. I think I'm going to take in this much money per month next year. I think I'm going to, spend this much money. So to make sure I don't spend too much, I've got to allocate it and try to figure out how much I have to spend for rent or groceries or whatever your other expenses may be. It's a planning document. If real life doesn't turn out that way, okay, you adjust and move on. I would say that's one of the purposes for our budget. One of three main purposes of the county budget. It's the one we're kind of used to. And there's a ton of detail in here, doing just that sort of thing. Here's what we've spent on this for the last couple of years, every year. Here's what we spent in the first 6 months. Here's how much revenue we had for this particular item the last couple of years. Here's how much revenue we're getting this year. Just kind of plan it out. Make sure we have some idea whether ends are going to meet. The second purpose is much more unusual, I think, among organizations. It's really an appropriations document. By statute, we can only spend money as a county that the board has appropriated. Now, the appropriations work very differently for a county government than for the state, but the principle is the same. You have to approve a category of expense before we can spend money on it. So much of what's in this book is detail about how we figured those categories of expenses and what we're asking you to approve as the county board for expenditures in 2023. So if you look, I'm going to refer to some pages in the book, follow if you like, don't follow if you'd rather not, but for instance, if you look at page 44, budget information on a fund accounting basis, it says expenditures, and expenditures are broken out by 4 categories, which the executive already referred to. There's a lot more detail in this book and a lot of different object accounts, but what you're actually appropriating is what falls into these 4 accounts and then by department or division. So the 4 categories are labor, which includes all forms of wages as well as fringe benefits. Travel expense, which is separated out, basic travel, meals, hotels, registration and tuition. And there's capital outlay and other operating expenses, which are really everything else, very broad categories. We just separate out those 3 and then have the catch-all everything else. So what you are really appropriating is those 4 numbers for each department. Okay, so you may be wondering why it isn't a much shorter book. It's because we want to give you a lot of detail as to how we calculated those amounts. But just to look at an example, maybe turn to Finance Department. We can pick on Finance Department, page 176. And you'll see fairly early on in the section regarding the Finance Department, if you look at that section, there's the mission statement and accomplishments and goals and staffing and major changes. But then there's financial summary, Finance Department. This is really what you're approving because it says the Finance Department can spend in 2023 $629,814 in labor. How we calculated that, we go employee by employee, figure out what the possible wage rate would be, what the possible raise would be, what the fringes are, there's a lot of steps we take to calculate that number. But when it comes right down to it, that's the amount you're approving. And if real life doesn't follow exactly what our labor spreadsheets predicted, it's fine as long as we don't go over that number for labor in the Finance Department. Right? So if we hire a new financial analyst and pay that person more, that's okay as long as we're paying someone else less or someone doesn't take the family health insurance, which, believe it or not, can be a major difference in your financial performance under the labor category. It's $22,000 a year, almost $23,000 for a family health insurance, much less if it's single. But that's the number we use as a control for that department. So that's how much money Finance Department can spend next year if this budget is passed as presented. All right? The next category, travel, is often much smaller. Just training, travel for conferences, things like that, $4,450. That's pretty simple. The capital category is capital projects that are included in the budget. And I want to look at that a little bit more detail first. We have 2 different kinds of capital spending in the county. Capital projects of a relatively smaller dollar amount are included in the budget. Capital improvement projects, on the other hand, are not included in the budget, and those are the larger ones. Generally, over $100,000 is considered a capital project, not just a budgeted item. So those are separated out and approved through the capital improvements plan or through separate resolutions that are brought to the board after a presentation. You've all seen a number of those at this point. But there are other smaller capital items that are included in the budget. Finance department is a bad example there because there aren't any included, but if there were smaller capital items, they would be included here. Then other expenditures. Other expenditures are the catch-all. That includes anything else, literally. And it can include different categories. There's office, operating, contractual services, if we contract things out, insurance, and so forth. There are some things we charge ourselves. So for instance, for workers' compensation insurance, that's a benefit that goes from departments into the workers' compensation fund. But the same is true, and that's a labor item, but for instance, for our property and liability insurance. It's a big bill every year. We charge departments for that. And so each department will have a line for that. So there's several items like that, and sometimes departments get revenue from another department. Solid waste gives HR and finance and many other departments some money for assisting with their projects because they want to keep their pot of money separate, so they want to pay for the services they get so it doesn't get taken out of the tax levy. So a lot of different categories, a lot of breakdown. Feel free to ask questions about the breakdown because they'll go to determine the total. And I skipped over on wages, a couple of points I wanted to make. The wages and labor, getting into the table of organization, but also wage increases. So the budget today we're looking at was based on two assumptions regarding wage increases. One assumption is that the merit pay will be an average of 4%. Now we have a merit pay system established by the board. There's a resolution saying all our raises, with a few exceptions, are through merit pay. So we don't have across-the-board pay increases, anything like that. It's all based on merit. So the average of 4%, we do some complicated math to figure out what you're actually going to get if you're an employee, and it's based on two things. It's based on your performance evaluation, and it's based on what the total pot of money is. It's also based on where you are in the pay range. It's weighted toward the lower paid employees so that someone who's nearer the starting pay gets a bigger raise than an employee who's already way up in the pay range near the maximum. That person's going to get a smaller increase because for the same performance, that second person is already getting paid like a great experienced employee. They've already gotten a lot of those raises. All right, so they're already getting paid for that exceptional performance, we hope. So that 4% is built into the budget. If you ask me what line do I change, if I want to change that 4%, it's built in every labor line, but there is a specific number, and that's on page 24 at the bottom. It says the merit pay pool for 2023 based on regular wages is $1,909,854. So by approving the budget, you'll be approving that total. Then the HR director, Mr. Habeck, is back there. We'll take that 1.9 million and basically divide it up so that everyone gets a proportional amount according to our merit pay system, which will, and that number is figured using an average of 4%. So it should come out to 4% or a little more depending on employee turnover. So I often get questioned about that. There's also an assumption that the minimums for our salary schedule will go up by 3% in 2023. Now that's a separate action the board has to take to approve that later. But it's built in, but it has a relatively small impact on the actual budget, on the labor numbers, because most people don't get a 3% raise. They get the merit raise. The only people who are affected by that 3% are people at the minimum and who haven't been here for 6 months by the end of the year to get a merit raise. So I just wanted to explain that a little bit. Otherwise, there's a lot of information in this book. I mentioned page 24. That's really where a lot of the significant county-wide information starts, and there are many tables. For instance, if I look at page 27, there's a 2-page table broken down by category and by department showing big picture kind of revenues and expenditures. So you can look at that and see if there are any patterns or anything that you don't like or anything you might want to change, and then drill down and see how those changes could be made. There are numerous little pie charts and tables that follow that. One other that I wanted to mention toward the end of that section, which is the first tab, is the table of organization. So the county board has controlled the number of full-time regular employees and the number of part-time regular employees generally, and that's in this table of organization. So there's a list beginning at page 72. I'm sorry, no, page, jumped ahead too far. Oh, there's my tab. I had a red tab on and everything. Page 60. That shows for every department how many positions are authorized. Now, we have some categories of temporary employees that aren't included in this, but for the regular positions, they all have to be in this table. And the changes made during the budget are shown here, but there's also right before that section, another section that'll list them in a more accessible form, countywide, just listing all the changes at page 56. And there's the financial impact of those changes starting at page 58. So you see, we've broken everything out three ways with different types of detail, so you can see that. But really, most of the detail is in the sections on the departments. So that's the section the county executive and department heads will now start going through with you. Each section has its own information about the department, about what significant changes have been made to the budget for that department, and I would certainly suggest you look closely at those changes. But then there's also the breakdown. In the breakdown, you'll see, for instance, using the finance department as the example on page 177, we have a lot of detail showing actual expenses by object code. The object code is, the detail, not just wages, but are these regular wages or overtime, not just other expense, but is this office expense or contracted services or a host of other categories that are all handled differently in the accounting system under that object code. So you can really see under the hood and see all the detail that went into building up those overall numbers that you're approving as the appropriations. Now, I mentioned under appropriations, it's really an expense matter. You don't have to appropriate the revenue. That's not a control. If someone gives us some money, there is a statute that the board approves grant funding and donations, but it's not really a budget control. If we end up with more revenue, we end up with more revenue, and that's great. So that works a little bit differently than the expense side. But the third purpose of the county budget that I haven't mentioned yet is assessment of the tax levy, apportionment of the tax levy. So once we figure out the possible revenue, likely expenses, we have to include tax revenue to balance the budget, obviously. That's our biggest source of income. And we have to levy that tax. That's up to the board to levy the tax to produce that revenue. So that's what we do. And as the executive mentioned, there is a levy cap imposed by state statute, and it basically tells us how much levy we can impose for general purposes. There's also a separate levy that's not subject to the cap for some things like library funding and especially debt service, which gives us kind of a perverse incentive to borrow because it doesn't affect our ability to raise taxes as much. And all those kind of go into a calculation, and we have to make sure that the levy we are imposing is less than or equal to the cap for general purposes. And this budget does impose a levy of $250,000 less than the cap for general operating levy. So that again is something for the board to consider, but we wanted to show at least some indication of compassion for the taxpayers, I guess, and not go to the complete maximum. So that's the executive's proposal. So all that's in here. The way this works is we go through each department's budget by budget. It's a chance for you to ask questions. If there are no questions, we'll move on quicker. If you have questions, that's great. We'll try to answer them as best we can. And then we'll move on to consideration of any changes the board may wish to make. I do want to point out, we've done two things. There's a form we'd like you to fill out if you wish to make a motion to amend. We emailed, or the clerk's office, I believe, emailed that to you this afternoon. You can use that online and fill out the form. If you need help, please talk to the department head, talk to myself, talk to Carol Blackmore, the assistant finance director who's sitting in the back. You can wave, Carol, so they know who you are. So please do that, and then probably the simplest thing to do is email your amendment to me so I can look it over and just make sure you have the right numbers on it that make sense. I'll try to help you if I can. I'm not passing judgment on your amendments. I just want to make sure we've got the right numbers on it, the right object codes, the right department codes, and so forth. And then we'll run that through Corp Council and so forth, and the board will vote on it. Those amendments, and that process takes place after we're through with the department presentations. So, thank you.
I do have some questions. I don't know which one of you they'll be for. Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank Mr. Collard for that wonderful overview of the budget. I've sat here for 16 years, and we've never had that explained to us. But my question is, as you explain an overview of the budget, can you address the elimination of the department organization charts? Will it be in the adopted version?
I'd be glad to address that. Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. We took that out on purpose this year because the organization charts, two things. First of all, we're often confused by people with the table of organization. And they were often different from the table of organization. It was very hard to keep them completely consistent. And it's important to have one document identified as the control that's being adopted by the board. The organizational charts aren't actually adopted by the board. It's up to departments to organize their own departments. Oftentimes during the year, there are changes. This person reports to that supervisor, now reports to a different supervisor. Things like that happen all the time. So we didn't think it was appropriate to put that in a document that the board approved, because that's really an administrative matter to present the organizational chart and to update it as changes are made throughout the year. Those don't come back to the board. So I think that caused a lot of confusion. I think it helped shrink the book a little bit. We can probably still find a little bit more of a diet to give the book. But it's not meant to hide that information by any means. The table is still in here for approval by the board. And the organizational charts, we can think about other ways to present them. A lot of departments have them and update them, and you can find them on the department's website. I don't think that's true consistently, but that's something we can consider and certainly encourage departments to do. We still have them, and would be glad to show them to you.
Well, may I comment?
Yes, you had over a minute left.
The budget is the only document that the public really perceives the county board. They don't see our auditing document. And this is the only vehicle the public has to see what the county organization looks like. And if it's necessary to put the organization chart in the appendix, so be it. But it is owed to the public, it is owed to the county board to have that chart.
Okay. Well, thank you. I certainly appreciate that comment, and we'll certainly consider that.
Supervisor Bender, oops, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
If we wanted to go back to across the board the way we used to have, how do we do that? I mean, when I worked at the county, we had step raises. Every 18 months, you went from an A to a B to a C to a D, and in approximately 7 years, you were at the top level. I mean, I don't think it's fair for a person that worked for us for 20 years, he can only get 4 shares, and a new person can get 7 shares, and every share is worth a certain percent, anywhere from a quarter to a half. So a person that's been an employee working for this county for basically, say, 10 to 20 years, he's not going to get a 4% raise. He's probably not going to get a 3% raise, even if he gets the top score on the chart. he gets a 90-something, he's not gonna get 7 shares like a new employee's gonna get. And I don't think it's fair that we basically give raises out, but because I've been here for a long time, I don't get the 4%. It's misleading. Everybody on Social Security is going to get an 8.7% raise. It doesn't mean that, well, he doesn't need it, so we'll give him a 6%, and, oh, this guy needs a little more, let's give him a 10%. I think we should be going back to a 4% across the board with the step raises, and how would I do that?
Well, the way to do it, it would need to be a county board resolution. So it's not a matter for the budget. There was a separate resolution passed by the board in 2014 declaring that raises would be only those calculated based on merit. Then there was a second resolution, I think in 2015, adopting the current merit pay plan we have, although there have been some changes since then. So it's a separate board action. There would just need to be a resolution, revoking the merit pay plan and adopting a different form of compensation plan, maybe something we can talk about after the current pay study is done.
Thank you.
Supervisor Albert.
Were all evaluations done on a one-on-one with the individuals?
Well, that's the policy.
They were all, everybody was evaluated one-on-one?
I can't say that for sure if there are any exceptions, but the practice and the policy are that there should be a one-on-one meeting.
Supervisor Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question of clarification on the merit pay increases. You mentioned that there's a 4% merit increase built into the budget, and that there's also a $2 million in contingency for the wage study. So are those two separate items, is what I need clarified.
Yes, they're separate. There's 1.9 million allocated for the merit raises, which would be an average of 4%. That's how we calculate it. But then the $2 million in the contingency fund, which we can talk about more when we get to that department really, but we have a contingency fund set up of $2 million with the idea that after the wage study, we might want to implement some changes, moving people to higher pay grades or raising the maximums or control points of different grades, and maybe make some pay adjustments. We don't know what yet because we haven't seen the pay study, so we want to set aside a significant amount of money to account for any of those adjustments that we might want to make later on. But there would have to be further board action to actually adopt whatever changes are proposed.
Thank you.
Not seeing any other questions.
All right, I'm going to just continue with this real quick. I've got one more sentence before I pass it back to Tom here, the Chairman Egan. So, Mike, thank you for that. I really do appreciate you giving that overview for the budget, and I'd be remiss if I didn't give credit to the one person that knows this book more than me and more than Mike, and that would be Carol Blackmore in the back. She would be the author of this book. She did a lot of hard work. This is somebody that we made a exception to, and a smart move that was to have you as our Deputy Finance Director, and we're glad to have you, and thank you very much for everything you put in here, and if we don't mind. All right, thank you.
Any questions for County Exec? Now's the time to ask, so. Supervisor Zastera.
Would it be possible that we could have one copy of the organizational chart to pass around within these next couple of days? That organizational, Supervisor Eisen has passed one paper, and I find that a very helpful visual. Thank you.
Yes, we can look into that. I agree with Supervisor Eisen that this should probably be something that's up on our website. This is something that the public should see. I guess the careful line we are trying to maneuver here is the roles and responsibility of county board and administration, and that there's a reason that job descriptions don't go to P&F for the county board, because we want to keep those separate. So to give you the documentation of the organizational chart would also give you the impression that you can change that organizational chart. Now, you can through funding. So we will look at getting those. I would refer to Director Collard. I believe Joan had most of those written out. But I do know that was one reason. The other reason is we are really trying to save paper.
Supervisor Robinson.
We did a horrible job of that. That I agree.
Supervisor Robinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Only one question here. The organizational chart changes quite frequently, is that not correct, Mr. Collard?
Well, in some departments it does, yes.
So how often would you be changing that online, like on a weekly, daily, yearly? I mean, it's kind of nice to have one on there for the public, but at the same time, it does change an awful lot.
I agree.
Not seeing any other questions for the county executive, for this is his budget. This is your last time. Okay. I want to thank you. Before we get started, there's a couple things I didn't announce. Tomorrow morning, we'll be starting at 8:30, but the doors will not open till 7:30. They won't let you in until 7:30, so if you plan to come early and eat all the rolls and the milk, all that the ladies have here, they won't let you in until then. So make sure and do that. Okay, our first one that's up tonight is Corporate Counsel Mary Ann Miller.
Executive first.
Right. Yeah. County Executive, well, okay, I'm sorry, County Executive. I thought you had given all yours already. Okay, County Executive.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Egan.
Apologize.
All right, my department consists of two major asks that you'll see, which result in roughly a $65,000 increase. In both cases, I'm looking to add services for our people. First, our employees. Overwhelmingly, I've heard from our employees that they want to be appreciated and treated as family. We took the first steps with Employee Appreciation Family Night. I want to direct you to the Special Service Award line item, which from 2022 to 2023 is proposed increase of $30,000. If you see in projected, you could see that number went up. That is because P&F granted us 14
Page
and a half.
84, if you can't find it.
I'm sorry. Let's see here.
83 and 84.
83 and 84, yep. Well, no, I think Supervisor Cox is right, 87. Where am I looking here? 53,566, Special Service Awards. So page 87. So you could see the 2022 adopted was 1,400. And then 2022 revised was the 16,000. That was the money P&F appropriated for the employee appreciation event. So I am asking for 31,444 in here, but I want to let you know how that's broken down. Traditionally, the county has provided a clock for retiring staff after 20 years. That is the end of our employee appreciation of what we've given out. So that's the extent of our thank you that we give to our employees on a daily basis. So the 31,400 proposed breaks out in this way. 1,400 to still remain for retirement services awards. Another 5,000 is proposed for other service awards, such as spot awards for people that go above and beyond. And then $25,000 are proposed for employee appreciation event next year. And I think we did well with the 14,900 this year, but we expect more people to come. We had a great turnout for year one. The other increase in my budget is to share with the Department of Administration and office assistant, who will largely be tasked for my portion of constituent services. When a constituent calls or visits my office, I want to make sure we have the capacity to respond and provide higher level case management for them. Additionally, the administrative assistant will be charged with scheduling and other tasks for both myself and Director Collard. I will continue to utilize my county executive assistant position as a policy/management analyst, working toward improving the information that comes out of my office and keeping us aware of the current trends and policy coming out of both Madison and Washington, D.C. It is this position that tipped us off to the neighborhood improvement grant, of which we would never have gotten in Winnebago County. In 2023, I want to focus on communication. I want to weekly email consistently to our employees, which I think all of you are getting those, correct? All right. I want to grow the county's new social media page. The administrative assistant will provide about 20 hours a week to ensure that we can achieve these goals. When looking at the top 10 counties in the state, Winnebago County still has the smallest staff in the county executive or county administrator office of all. Adding another 0.5 FTE to my office, we will still have the smallest in the top 10 counties out there. My office will remain smaller than the majority of state representative office, who provide support to about a third of the population that we have here in Winnebago County. I'm not requesting to add staff to do the same amount of work, and I want to be very clear. We have done that in the past. I am requesting additional staff to increase services still to our community. We have come a long way since I was elected in 2021. We now are used to seeing standardized agenda item reports and draft resolutions. We have revamped our websites and increased communications. We have come a long way, but we have a long way to go. And we will need help in the administrative office to lead that change. And on that note, I'm happy to answer any questions on the executive budget.
I see no questions at this time for you, so see no questions.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Now I'll be corporate counsel, Mary Ann Miller. That starts on 88.
No, I'm fine. I have it. Thank you. Right. On page 88 of your budget books, you will see the section devoted to corporation counsel. Let me lower this. John is a little bit taller than I am. I am vertically challenged. Page 88. It starts, as you will see, with the various types of cases we handle. We obviously serve as legal counsel to the 27 departments, department heads, county executive, and answer supervisors' questions, 36 supervisors' questions to the best of our ability. We also, as you all know, handle CHIPS cases. Those are children in need of protection or services cases. We handle terminations of parental rights, guardianships, protective placements. We handle mental health commitments, 980 placements, which I know many of you perhaps recall, in rem tax foreclosures, orders to show cause, zoning violations, and civil forfeitures. My office consists of 3 attorneys, including myself, 3 paralegals, and 1 administrative assistant. Melanie Bolter is one of our paralegals. You can stand up so people know who you are. All right. Hello. If you go to page 90, it will show you the various accomplishments. I do want to point out that this was compiled as of June 8th, 2022, just to sort of give you an update. In terms of guardianships, as of October 3rd, that number that we've handled has gone from 59 to 103. Terminations of parental rights has gone from 11 to 13. We have had juvenile CHIPS cases that have gone up to 25, and guardianships, juvenile guardianships, have gone up to 17. In terms of mental health commitments, that number is now, as of today, 367 mental commitments that have been e-filed. So that gives you an idea as to basically what we've been handling. I will point out, if you go to page 92, it talks about significant changes that have occurred in our department. Now, you will see that there is about almost $19,690 request for additional attorney assistance. Appellate litigation in Chapter 51 cases, and those are mental health commitment cases, has increased substantially. It involves research, it involves brief writing, where we would submit briefs to either the Court of Appeals or in some cases the Supreme Court of Wisconsin, the highest court in our state. We have approximately 12 in our office as I stand here today, in various stages of the appellate process. We anticipate writing, we just completed writing 2 briefs in October. We anticipate there is going to be one for November and one for December. Each brief can take 20 to 40 hours of attorney and paralegal time, depending again on the number and complexity of the issues. Additionally, case numbers, as you can see in the Chapter 51 cases at the trial level, which is the circuit court where we are now, continue to increase. So based on the average attorney hourly rate in this geographic area, based on the fact that the yearly guardian ad litem rate totals $21,000, each guardian ad litem will get $1,750 per month. It is anticipated that our office is going to need a minimum of 20 hours of additional attorney assistance. So this $19,690 is going to hope to cover a portion of the costs, with the remainder taken from the already included 2023 legal services budget line on 55001. You may know and have heard that we are working on an update to the general code. We have contracted with MuniCode to assist us in that venture. Portions of the code have not been updated going back to the 1980s. I kid you not. So there is a huge amount of work involved in that, and that is another piece of the attorney assistance piece. So that is where the legal services piece comes in. And the next big change is referencing $49,451, and that is regarding purchasing computer software. We've all heard that we need to try to reduce our paper footprint, and that's what our office is trying to do. We want to purchase legal office management software. It's going to be addressing components of litigation and transactional billing. Essentially, the vendor would assist our office in developing a protocol, assisting with installation on the Office of Corporation Counsel's network, and configuring parameters. The training would include training and configuration assistance. There would need to be 8 licenses purchased because, again, we have 3 attorneys, we have 4 staff, and we need 1 IT person who needs a license, since our IT department would be assisting as well. There would be 3 levels of support provided from this vendor, and that would be telephone and email user support, as well as telephone and email technical support, as well as on-site technical support if there were problems. So that is the other big ask that we have here. If you continue to go through the budget, you will see on page 93 the financial summary reflecting the fact that, again, we have a revenue line. I will say the revenue line is based on my office providing assistance to other counties in terms of mental commitments. When we have certain mental commitment cases, and they are at the Wisconsin Resource Center, many of the people at the Wisconsin Resource Center are not Winnebago County residents. They could be residents of Dane County, they could be residents of Brown County, they could be residents of Milwaukee County. And as a result, given the fact that they are in Winnebago because they are at the Wisconsin Resource Center, My office is tasked with essentially following through on pursuing the commitments. But since they are residents of a different county, we charge that other county for the services we render in terms of going to a probable cause hearing, preparing expert witnesses, going to an evidentiary hearing. So that's what the revenue line can represent. As you continue down, you will see the labor line, again, as Mr. Collard indicated, that represents basically the wages that we have, coupled with overtime and not actually health insurance and things of that like. Travel, again, we have not $3,775. That would include going to various continuing legal education seminars in order to keep our licensure up, because attorneys are required to maintain certain components of that. We are not making any requests for capital outlays. And in terms of the other expenditures, that is everything else. And just to give you an idea, if you go to, let's see, page 96, that constitutes the other expenses, and it ranges from office supplies to subscriptions to membership dues. Membership dues basically are the attorneys having to continue to be licensed in the state of Wisconsin, so there's an annual membership due, DUE. There are witness expenses. When we have doctors who are testifying for us in either CHIPS cases, in mental commitments, in guardianships, there is a fee charged for testifying. There's, you'll see the legal services line. We have a transcription line. That is when there are appeals, we need to get a transcript from the court reporter to go through the transcript to prepare for the appeal. So that represents that. But in any event, those are just some of the highlights, and I would be happy to take any questions.
Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Near the end of all of that, you said something about no capital expenses, but I thought much earlier you had talked about purchasing computers and software to help you get through files, lengthy files. Are computers and software, isn't that a capital expense?
Well, no, it isn't. If it was a request to get office management software.
Okay.
So we're not buying we do have laptops.
Yeah.
But no, this is a program to help us streamline and reduce the paper footprint we have.
Okay, a couple more questions. And that program, is that an American-made program?
Is that an American?
Yeah, American-made program.
I believe it is. It's called MuniCode. I don't.
Okay, my concern, I attended a judiciary and public safety meeting for the state in Stevens Point a couple weeks ago, and I believe, now don't quote me, I believe it was Representative Schra who wants all these drones that counties have purchased that were from China to be destroyed and purchase local ones. And I can understand that reasoning because they're worried about what might have been included in these Chinese-made drones. So my concern is if we're purchasing software or computers, either way, that we really should be looking at American things so that down the road, the assembly doesn't come to us and say, okay, you got Chinese stuff, they might be having chips and extra things in there that we don't want them to have access to, destroy it all and start over again.
I can tell you, I have an email from Legal Files, and they are based in Springfield, Illinois.
I would accept that as in the country.
Yeah, I don't think that's a different country.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just quickly looking to see.
I'm happy, Counselor. Thank you.
Okay.
Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Corporation Counsel, where is the travel expense for you and your staff to travel from the administration building back and forth to the courthouse?
I'm going to try to find the line item, just bear with me. Oh, if you go to line item 52002, you will see there is a reduction of 41%. Now, many of our hearings, as we are at this point, at least for probable cause hearings, are being done by Zoom. So we are not having to go back and forth for some of the probable cause hearings. We are still going back and forth for the CHIPS hearings, for the guardianship hearings, but based on, again, the practice so far, we have cut back transportation for the probable cause hearings because that commissioner is allowing us to appear via Zoom.
Thank you.
Supervisor Bender.
Just curious, do you think it'd be beneficial for us to add in some money and add on to the Oregon King building and move you back where you belong?
I would leave that decision to the board.
Not seeing any other questions, we thank you, Corporate Counsel.
Actually, and let me clarify, when I say the board, the county executive handles the day-to-day affairs. As you know, the board handles the policy piece of this. And it was quite clear that County Executive Damel wanted our office closer to him.
He knew he was gonna be in trouble.
I guess we maybe could build it big enough and move him there too.
Okay.
Thank you. Next is County Clerk Sue Ertmer. It starts on page 98.
Thank you, Chairman Egan. I can go through just some of the basics of what our department does if you'd like. Otherwise, I can just entertain questions if you have any specifics about any of the amounts in the budget. I did want everybody to know this evening I was announcing I will be retiring in February. So some of the increase you'll see a little bit. Yeah, it'll be over almost 44 years. So I started in April of '79. So thank you. So anyway, it feels like it's time. I'll be hitting that golden age in February, and so and it's time to kind of move on. So anyway, so some of the comments that are in there as far as for goals and objectives, change of leadership, so there'll be some potentially increases because of the health insurance, the new people coming in, not sure exactly what the health insurance plan that they would take. But otherwise, we were able to maintain a pretty good budget as the executive had asked us. The election side of our office will be reduced in 2023 because there'll only be 2 elections. Those will be spring elections. So we don't have as much expense for elections. So like I said, if anybody has any specific questions about anything, I'll be happy to answer those.
Supervisor Flom.
I don't have any questions. I just want to say thank you so much for your years of service and the help that you've given to us at the JPS committee. It's been fantastic to have you as a resource, and I wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Not seeing any other questions. I think we all want to thank you very much, and we look forward to keep on seeing you come back and forth. Just because you're not behind that side, you can still come and see us all.
Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I'll be around for a few months.
All right.
So, all right.
Best
Thank
of
you,
luck.
everyone. Thank you.
Next is County Treasurer Mary Krieger, and that starts on page 115.
Good evening. So the Treasurer's Office is responsible for the receiving and dispersing of all county funds. You can see that on the mission statement on the front of what we do. The majority of our time is spent dealing with other departments and municipalities, the local municipalities. Looking at page 118, that has the significant changes. The big one of $76,000 is we're changing the way we record our monthly interest that we earn on our bank accounts, along with how we record the expenses that go along with those. We used to net those transactions, so some months we would earn more interest and we record it as a revenue, and then other months our fees were more than the interest earned, so we would record it as expense. Now we're doing actuals. We're going to record any revenue that we earn as revenue and the expenses as the expense every month. So that is the reason for that change within that. My staff is, my office is 4 staff, including myself. I took over back in 2000. We had 5.5 for staff, so we have come down in staffing within the treasurer's office. The treasurer's office is a revenue-creating office because we deal with the collection of delinquent taxes, so we have the interest that we collect off of those taxes. Our office is responsible for reconciling our daily banking activity that we see within our account. So whatever the other departments are saying is going to be revenue coming in, that's going to filter in through our office. What they have as expenses within their offices, those will filter through our office as well, through payroll or through expense payables. So we are responsible for the receiving and dispersing. I was able to meet and actually a little bit exceed the levy target that was given to me from the executive's office. So if anybody, that kind of narrows down my office, if anybody has any questions.
Not seeing any, I thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Next will be, it used to be called coroner, but as of the first of the year, it'll be called the medical examiner. We'll have Cheryl Burmer. And that starts on page 263. 262, I'm sorry. 262. 262.
Good evening. The coroner's office, or soon to be the medical examiner's office, is an office of 4 people. We have 3 investigators, including myself, and an administrative assistant. I also was able to stay within the levy that was given to me. Not a lot of significant changes have been made to the budget. I do have one 80% employee, which I'd like to make 100%. She continuously works over her 30 hours without complaining. Our office just continues to get busier, and I truly believe she will put in that 40 hours or more. So, not a lot to discuss unless you have questions for me.
Supervisor Powers.
The 80% employee that you have you put that in your budget that you want to increase that to a full-time employee?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Cheryl, when will you write a mission for the coroner medical examiner's office? This is the only department that does not have a mission statement in their presentation.
We do have a mission statement.
It's on page 261.
Supervisor Eisen, they said it's on page 261.
261?
Thank you.
261.
Are there any other questions? Not seeing any, I thank you very much.
Thank you. 61.
Next is administration, human resources, payroll, finance, information technology placement. Mike Collard.
124 it starts on.
I humbly apologize.
So I'd like to cover, we actually have a number of budgets included under the rubric of administration. I'd like to cover the ones I'm directly responsible for, and then perhaps we can do the finance department. But then the human resources budget, payroll, health insurance, and dental insurance budget should be covered by Director Habeck, who's back here. And the information technology and the technology replacement fund budget should be covered by Director Franco, who's here as well. So it'll be a little bit different order, and there are actually a couple budgets that weren't on the agenda but are separately listed under the rubric of, under the heading of administration. So under the administration department itself, it's a new department created just this past July by the board, and kind of a reorganization, creating the director of administration position, directly reporting to me, and as part of the direct department of administration have been, first of all, the purchasing manager position and the risk manager position. There's also a general services unit which has one employee who reports directly to the purchasing manager. So in the administration department per se, there are two changes in personnel proposed. One is just really a title change for the purchasing manager. It's really become very involved in they call contract administration, ongoing administration of contracts. So we'd like to retitle that as contract and procurement manager. Just update that a little bit. And then we also have a clerical administrative associate position, administrative associate 4 position to be shared with the county executive's office. And in terms of how I would use our half of that person's time, it would be primarily support of the risk manager, who handles all our workers' comp, all our property and liability insurance, and safety matters. And he doesn't have enough time to do safety because he has too much paperwork to do. So I'd really like to take some burden off of him on the insurance paperwork, and as well some support to the contract and procurement manager. So those are really the only changes. It's primarily labor budget, very little office expense or revenue. And of course, no changes because it's our first annual budget for the administration department. Before I move on and ask for questions, I'll also cover general services. General services is a separate fund. So there's just one employee, there's no tax levy and no use of general fund balance. This is what we call a proprietary fund, one that's really kept separate. We try to balance, keep the income and expense in that fund without affecting the tax levy one way or the other. You know, kind of like it was a separate business working for us. And so primarily what General Services does is printing. You are right now probably touching one of their main accomplishments for the year, printing these budget books. It's in the basement of the courthouse here. They print a lot of the other agenda items for the county board. So it's basically our county printer, and they also handle some of the mail services, although we do use some contract services for mail and interoffice mail as well. So no major changes there, and the administration department is what it is. So I can cover the workers' comp and property liability, but maybe if there are any questions right now would be a good time to.
Supervisor Eisen?
To explain the ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act funds, the $33 million in this year's budget. It should at least be a footnote someplace so that the public and also the supervisors are appraised that this money is in process of being assigned and reassigned.
Well, all I can really say is there's nothing in the budget that covers the ARPA funds. They are not budgeted at this point. They won't be budgeted by adopting this budget. We did have a couple of resolutions earlier this month, as you're all aware. Filed our quarterly report today with the Treasury Department, but there will be further ARPA Strategy and Outcomes Commission meetings, and they will make appropriate recommendations to the board. So I'm sure you'll be getting a lot of information at various times about that, but there's nothing in the budget that addresses that.
Supervisor Nichols?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The county executive mentioned in his presentation that his budget included an administrative assistant at 20%, which was an additional person. And on page 126, and you mentioned that the 2023 budget has one full-time administrative associate, 4 being added to the table of organization and split between the county executive's office and the Department of Administration office. So is that someone who's already on staff? Is it additional people? Help me understand what's happening here.
It would be one additional person, one new person who has not been hired yet. Probably use the reception desk in the county executive's office to be there to greet constituents or answer questions from people who walk in, but then split time 50% to the executive's office and 50% to the administrative office. So I'm not sure if the executive said 20%, I think that was misspeaking, and I think it's intended to be 50-50, although you may have caught me in my devious plan to actually use 80% of this person's time, but it's not supposed to be a record. Yeah.
So to be clear, what's planned, what's budgeted for is an additional person, administrative assistant position, to be shared between the Department of Administration and the county executive's office.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Am I to take it, if this position is approved in the budget, that a job description will be forthcoming?
Yes, there will be a job description if it's approved, and we'll go through the regular recruitment process for the position.
Just refresh my memory, will this board approve of that job description, or do we not have to? I'm just curious.
No, job descriptions never come to the board.
But there will be one?
But there will be one.
Okay.
Supervisor Bender.
Did we not have somebody sitting at that desk when John Fink was here, and we hired a person to take that job? So why isn't that person sitting at that desk and doing the job he was hired for?
The person who replaced John Fink.
John's job when he retired. So that job should be filled. Somebody should be sitting at that desk, answering the phone and doing what John did for 20-some years or 30 years. So where do we have the opening there? We have a person sitting at that desk, supposedly.
Yeah. Well, and the person who replaced John did sit at that desk. Then we had an intern sitting there for a while. Now there's a new office space a little bit further back, but they can still see the door that person is sitting in most of the time.
So we have somebody for that job already.
Well, but there are other duties. It's not that we don't have the door covered, it's that constituent services are demanding, and the executive's office is requesting a half-time clerical person to augment the staff they currently have.
Okay, I see no other questions at this time.
Okay. I did want to, with your leave, just move on to quickly let's see, I think the next one is the Workers' Compensation Fund budget, which begins at page 139. This is under my supervision, although the risk manager, Joel Lepke, is the primary county manager who works with workers' compensation. Wisconsin counties are one of the few employers in Wisconsin that can go self-insured for workers' compensation, which is very unusual. And it's a great boon to the county, frankly. We save a ton of money by being self-insured. So we're kind of like health insurance. We essentially run our own little workers' compensation insurer in-house, and that's our workers' compensation fund, which is another one of those proprietary funds that operates almost like a separate business. So we charge departments for premiums based on how many employees they have and how many hours and a percentage of their labor dollars for different categories of employees. We figure our own internal premiums, if you will, based on labor costs. We move that money into the workers' compensation fund, then we hire a third-party administrator to actually administer the claims, which is very important. We have a great relationship with our administrator. And then we hire well, we pay for another insurance company to pay for extremely large claims and what's called stop-loss insurance. If there's a claim over $300,000 for one person, knock on wood, we haven't had that for over 10 years. The insurance would actually kick in. Otherwise, we just pay it ourselves. Whatever the claims are, as administered by our third-party administrator, we pay it out of the fund. There are also some other administrative expenses. We have legal expenses for when cases go to hearing or are settled and so forth. So we try to balance that every year, except we also look at the fund balance. Right now, the fund balance is projected to end the year at $2.3 million. We don't need that much, so we decided to subsidize some. When it gets over $1.5 million, we typically subsidize the premiums a little bit. The actual dollar amount of workers' comp claims in any year can vary quite a bit, fluctuates up and down. So we actually project out claims based on a 4-year weighted average. But then if we have more money than we really need in the fund balance, we just subsidize by a certain amount. So we subsidize by about $400,000 in this budget, which benefits departments who are paying the premiums we charge. But otherwise, no major change in the budget structure for workers' comp. Perhaps if there are questions separately in that, otherwise I'll move on to property liability, which works very much the same way in that we have our own fund, but it's not self-funded. It's not self-insured, I should say. We do have a separate fund because we use that as a device to charge departments for the premiums that we allocate among all the operating departments. But here we're mostly not self-funded. We're mostly actually insured. So we have various forms of liability insurance. Our main liability carrier is County Mutual Insurance Company, which was established by counties many years ago, really for this purpose of providing good coverage for county governments. We also have property insurance, and that's moved to different insurers who are placed, different insurances which are placed through our broker of Robertson Ryan. So there's really quite a variety of specific coverages we have. We look at that every year. This year the biggest change was in, well, the property insurance is what's really going up. Our liability experience has been good, again, knock on wood, but the property insurance is getting more expensive, and we did a more comprehensive survey of our actual property to make sure it was all properly listed. You won't believe how many different boilers and how many different buildings and the different schedules of property we have to put together. It's a lot of paperwork. That's why we need a little bit of help for the person who manages this. But otherwise, fundamentally the same kind of budget that we've had. I can't say that there was really a subsidy in this one.
Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry, Director Collard. When you talked about that we were self-insured, is that health insurance kind of stuff?
We are self-insured for health insurance. I haven't really covered that yet, but we are also self-insured for workers' compensation.
Oh, that's what you're talking about. Okay.
And that's what I was talking about.
So you're getting ready to talk about health insurance? Or
Mark will talk about health insurance in a couple of minutes, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, what is your target for the fund balance on the property on the property and liability insurance?
I don't know that we have a formal target.
Then can you just speak to the choice to budget a surplus on this line? I assume that is to build up the fund revenue, or is that just the trend of our expenses?
Our fund balance is about $800,000, so certainly not at a level that I would want to do a subsidy of the premium. Just want to look at that, remind myself what surplus we have, about a surplus of about $100,000. It's probably really just to cover uncertainties, and frankly, we have to figure the premiums before we figure the detailed budget. So there's just a little bit of a variance between the draft budget I had to do when I calculated the premiums that figured the charges to departments, and the actual budget. When I looked at it, we actually got some quotes late in the year after the premiums had been calculated. We got some quotes that were lower expenses than we expected. So that kind of produced the surplus, but otherwise, I'm comfortable with it at that level. I'd rather have the fund balance at $1 million than $800,000 for this.
Yeah, no, thanks. That's really helpful, kind of looking at some of the actuals, both on our chart, but also previous to that, some of them were significantly higher than the, 80,000, 100,000 that we've been looking at the last couple. So I was just wondering if there was a target or intention there, or just the way the numbers lined up. Thank you.
Supervisor Eisen. Supervisor Eisen? No? Okay. I see no other questions at this time then.
As long as I have up here, then maybe I'd move ahead to the finance department budget, if I could, which is starts on page 172, so we're skipping ahead a little bit. We'll get back to the HR budgets in a minute. So the finance department budget, again, there aren't major changes except those due to the reorganization. In other words, the purchasing manager was part of the finance department. General services was underneath the finance department prior to the administration department's creation earlier this year. So there are some increased expenses other than labor, moving some things around. You'll see some decreases there. It doesn't mean we're paying finance people less. That hasn't worked. It just means we've moved some positions into the administration department, particularly the purchase manager. We have had some increased auditing and expenses for preparation of our annual comprehensive financial statements, which is complete for 2021. If you look back at when we prepared this budget, I was working with Carol, who put together a lot of this budget, of course, and she asked me what our main accomplishments would be, and I said it's survival. We lost, within the space of 3 months, we lost the director of finance, the assistant director of finance, and the accountant position out of, what were there, 7 total in the department. So just to keep things going was an accomplishment. So we did that, and otherwise things are moving ahead. We're trying to present a good budget tonight and have a lot of plans for things we can do in the future to tighten some things up. But otherwise, it's our accounting department, and hope to continue providing service. And if you have any questions, certainly be glad to address those.
Supervisor Norton.
Thank you. I think this is appropriate. I think last year, my colleague Supervisor Binder put an amendment to have a grant writer, I believe, and that was turned down. I supported that, and I guess I'm curious why we don't put in for having a grant writer, someone who would not only just write the grants, but also maybe a coordinator of the grants that all departments have. I mean, let me answer that question. I'll give you an example. Last month I told you about we were eligible for nickel that said we were eligible for $100,000, and I guess I concluded that neither you nor the county executive knew about that. And I guess if we had a full-time grant coordinator or someone to write, that they would keep track of this and maybe find other resources to fund what we want to do, both in programs and services. So I'm just curious why you haven't done that.
Well, first of all, on the last point, I certainly was very aware of that program you mentioned. As soon as it came out, I got emails from several different sources about that and looked on the website and figured out what we needed to do. It's a January deadline to apply, and we'll take care of that. So, on the other hand, on the larger point, as director of administration, I've been very involved certainly with the ARPA funds and with the neighborhood improvement grant funds of $10.5 million. So certainly some major aspects of grants have been fallen in my lap, and I've been working on as director of administration. That said, I'm not necessarily against having a grant writer position. It certainly wasn't in this budget. But sometimes when we look at that and talk about that as staff, as a management team, we have people in various departments that very much deal with the grants and have expertise in certain areas. And what we found is that if you want expertise in writing a grant for public health, it's very different than from even human services, and very, very different from the sheriff's office, all of which write grants regularly, and they all have people with that expertise. So it's really been more a matter of having a decentralized approach to grant writing because of the specialized nature and the very specific grants that we have in different departments, even in, you know, parks or land and water, you know, very different sources for grants. So there's nothing against having someone try to coordinate that all, but in management discussions, we thought the decentralized approach had been working well for us, and not to change that at the present time, at least in terms of what we presented in the budget so far.
Okay, Mr. Collard.
Anything else? I'll turn it over to Mark Habeck, who was Director of Human Resources.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Board. I'm here tonight to discuss three budgets, the Human Resources.
I'm going to pull your mic a little bit closer to you.
I'm here tonight to speak regarding three budgets. You'll find the first one on page 151, the Human Resources budget. I will also be covering the self-funded health insurance and self-funded dental insurance. So you'll see right away on page 151 that the Human Resources Department is responsible for recruitment, retention, labor relations, benefits administration. And I'd like to highlight a few of our accomplishments on page 152. In the first 6 months of this year, we have hired 144 new county employees, which puts us on pace to hire more employees than we had last year. Recruitment certainly is a challenge for us, as with many employers, but we are continuing to hire. We also transitioned operations of Three Waves Employee Health and Wellness Clinic from to a different provider this year. And one of the goals with that was to expand services that we can offer. We're now offering physical therapy and virtual primary care. As part of that health clinic, it's a partnership with the school district and the city of Oshkosh to pool our resources and provide quality services at a reduced cost for our employees. That is one area that we feel that we can help control health insurance costs. In addition, if you look at point 11, we retained a consultant to perform a compensation study to provide recommendations to align and maintain our compensation schedule to the current labor market. With this being a budget presentation, I don't want to go into too much detail, but I'm sure that question's out there. We have been working with the consultant. We are still on a timeline as originally proposed to have a presentation to the board in either December or no later than January of next year regarding those recommendations. Any of the labor numbers or proposed increases in this budget do not have any changes, obviously, from the consultant. That'll be a separate issue that the board will have the opportunity to address. So as we spoke about the compensation schedule itself for next year, we are proposing a 3% increase, and this budget is based on an average of 4% increase for staff, and that's completely separate from any changes to the compensation study.
Got a couple questions right away.
Sure.
Supervisor Alberg.
I don't have a question.
Supervisor Cox.
Mark, sounds like we've got a little mission creep on the wage study.
Could you get closer to your mic, please, Supervisor Cox?
It sounds like we've got a little mission creep on our wage study. I mean, it was supposed to be done at the end of October, and now it's going into January? Why?
No, the timeline's always been, we put it out for RFP in May. We received proposals back from consultants in June. If you remember, in the request for proposals, that's what we requested of the consultants. We had originally wanted to have the study done prior to the budget so that the board could consider any changes at this time. And that's the proposal that we put out for the consultants. We also allowed the consultants to tell us if they couldn't make that type of timeline, what timeline they would propose. And all responses had approximately 6 months to complete the compensation study. So that contract was awarded in July, which the 6 months that all the proposals referenced would take us to January. So we did request from all the vendors who proposed that we would have results by October.
Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you much, Mr. Chairman. Wow, I mean, 144 new employees in 6 months, that's even really high. I know last year at the budget time, the board considered a resolution to add a, I think it was a generalist, and I see there's a position added. I wanted to ask if you think one position at this point sort of gives you enough flexibility to continue to hire at an increasing rate. It seems to me, and maybe we'll see later in this session, that the challenges of hiring continue to grow. Obviously, your performance and hiring so many people is sort of the downstream product of that. But yeah, I'll just start with that. Like, do you think this gives you the right size to hire people quickly and do the other HR functions that you need to?
Well, it certainly helps. Thank you for the question. I will say that last year it was a human resource advisor position that one of the supervisors had proposed that we add in the budget. That was not approved. This year, as part of this budget, I am requesting an additional HR generalist, which would focus on recruitment and hiring. I can tell you that right now the challenges we face, we've got 48 unique positions that we're trying to hire for throughout the county. We have approximately 95 full-time positions and 46 part-time positions, and my department supports 25 different departments within the county. So it's a lot for the 8 full-time and 2 part-time staff that we have. As far as if that's enough, it could be. That's always the challenge. One of my concerns, honestly, is as we expand capacity on the hiring side of things, we have, after the hire, we have benefit orientations, we have payroll processing, we have benefits administration, enrolling new employees into those benefit programs that we offer. And right now we have 2 employees that handle payroll for the entire county. So if there's a concern from staffing once we address the recruitment side of things, from my perspective, the payroll would be a challenge, making sure that we have enough trained staff and redundancy in those functions to handle unanticipated absences, retirements, things like that.
Thank you. And then lastly, could you just talk about some of the things, some of the outcomes that if this new position is added, that it will do, like in terms of the time it takes to hire, the ability to generate large pools of applicants, any other functions that this position would help expedite?
Well, one of the areas that would help in is, first of all, in advertising. This budget, even though it's not a significant increase, that's highlighted in your budget. In this past year, we've had $7,000 set aside for advertising for county positions. This budget increases that by $4,000, and certainly another position would help us not only to do the advertising, but on sites like Indeed, it's not just posting a job out there. If you want to have it be successful, you really need that engagement piece. You have to reply to people who are applying. You need to be able to tell them about your openings, and that's the piece that takes up resources and time. In addition, out of those 25 departments I spoke about, up to this point, our office has had about half of the departments in the county really don't have a primary human resource professional to reach out to, whether that's for recruitment, whether it's for benefits questions, whether it's for just, either employee issues, support and training employees, any of those types of things. So really what ends up happening are those departments, they call and get whoever happens to be available, which leads to they don't have the consistency that some of the larger departments have. So my vision for this position would be every department in the county would actually have a designated primary point of contact within human resources. Obviously, we cover for each other, we would help each other out, but it gives that consistency for departments.
Thank you very much.
Supervisor Gabbard.
I wasn't going to ask any questions, but you do a great presentation. So
Thank you.
I talk about the box, and the box is the job description. I'm assuming, and I've heard in the past, that you are flexible, or that department is flexible on changing certain wording in that box description, because you are the experts on what you're looking for. But if there was a candidate, and I believe in the past this has happened, you can tweak it a little bit to get the correct candidate. Is that correct? And I don't mean tweak it a lot, but if there's someone out there that really wants the job and you really want them, but they don't have every single iota of that description, you could tweak the box. Or are you saying not?
We could, to answer your question, first of all, when departments submit fill requests for positions that have been approved by the board, someone retires, they have the opportunity at that time to review the position description. We'll make any adjustments that they would like to make. But then also, if we post a job, some of our positions, depending on the requirements, do have strict requirements, either education, certification. Some of those we don't change. However, other aspects, we may have preferences. We may require, say, an associate's degree, but we prefer a bachelor's, depending on the position. Education is a common one. If we end up changing the requirements or decide that we haven't recruited enough quality candidates based on the requirements that are there, we have made adjustments, but then we repost that job so that someone who perhaps didn't initially apply because they didn't meet those requirements, they would now see that we've changed that. And it puts them on the same footing as anyone else where they would be able to apply, and we could then consider them.
And then of the employees that you are looking for, a lot of them are for Parkview.
Absolutely.
Let's all be practical.
Yes.
We're looking for CNAs and nurses. So, and that's a cumbersome task because we're finding that they're not out there. But I'm sure you're keeping at it, and I see it posted, so we'll get something resolved. So let's just go back to the box for a minute. If someone doesn't have a bachelor's degree, but is working on one, or doesn't have a certain certification, does this county in particular tell the candidate, unfortunately, we took your application, but you don't have that certification, or we can't hire you because our box says you have to have a bachelor's? But what if they were getting it in a year? Do you ever take that into consideration?
We do have some positions where they have certain timeframes to meet requirements, and it really is position specific.
Okay.
So for instance, in human services, we'll hire social work specialists that are not licensed as social workers, but they have 1 year from their date of hire to obtain that.
Okay.
Likewise, at Parkview, we're trying to hire CNAs. We're trying to hire CNAs that are going to school for nursing that we can develop internally. That's one of the reasons why Parkview created the hospitality aide position, so we could bring people in who aren't certified, provide that training on site, and then turn them into CNAs.
Correct. Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Internships. I went to a WCA thing a couple years ago, and they said an important way or a valuable way is getting people or young people to work for the county government is to get them in internships. So my questions are kind of general. Do we have a general policy on internships for the county, or do we just let every department get an intern that they want? And and does each department find their own way how to compensate that person? And I guess I want to give an example. The county executive had an intern, and I mean, it's perfectly right, but I mean, do we have was that intern compensated? That's not my question, basically, but do we have a general policy of internships, and have we thought about maybe finding a better way, a more aggressive way of using internships and apprenticeships to get college-age students and that age involved in wanting to work for county government?
Great question. And we do have internships throughout the county. And I'll tell you, that's one of the things actually the county executive has been particularly passionate about. He talks about the resources we have right here, be it the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, Fox Valley Tech, the campus on the north end, about utilizing as many resources as we can to bring in students, expose them to county government positions that are here. To your question, if we have a sole policy specific to internships, no, I've spoken with the executive about developing that. We do have some limitations right now in how we classify employees. We don't have an internship classification per se, and we've had some conversations about that. Departments typically will take care of their own internships as far as, again, human services. I know they work with human services at UW Oshkosh, bringing in interns, and we've hired some of those interns actually once they've graduated.
I think other question I want to ask is, you said we have $11,000 for employee advertising.
Yes.
Now, when you say that, does that mean that's for countywide, so that when other departments, like I know Mike Elders had his own advertising, or on his vehicle and on a yard sign, he has his own separate part of his own budget they expend, or is that $11,000 part of that? I'm just curious.
Yes. So in the past, when we had $7,000, that $7,000, we use that for all departments, all vacancies, whether it's advertising on sites like, say, an Indeed, for instance, or some of the governmental sites that we use, cost. And obviously, we try to advertise on every free platform that we can as well. But in the case of, say, facilities, they've got some nice magnetic signs that they placed on their vehicles. Parkview, I think it was 2 years ago, we tried something different. We did a bus wrap on one of the city buses in town. Those, we didn't have the funds from HR to do that, and the departments actually had money that they were able to allocate. Now, by increasing from 7 to 11, will we be able to necessarily cover all those things? More so than we have at this point, but frankly, with the sheer volume of positions that we have to fill, I really think we need to bolster and be proactive as much as we can in recruitment.
Supervisor Bender.
Over the past years, we've been having well over 20% of our employees basically leave. And you know what it costs to train employees. If you could add one thing to the budget that would help us to retain employees, I mean, not have the turnover. I mean, when you look at 1 out of 5, that's like, there's 5 of you up there, 1 of you are not going to be there, and Sue's not going to be here in February. So it's statistics. 1 out of 5 is leaving our workforce every year. And it's a lot to train 80, yet 20% of your workforce you have to retrain. What could we do for you to, it'd be easier to keep the employees employed in the county so we don't have to train 20% every year?
I love that question, and I wish I could give you the perfect answer because you really set it up nicely for me. Off the top of my head, though, I would have to say really a commitment as far as training dollars, both for specific departments, as well as in our department, for instance, we also have training dollars more so for, we do supervisory roundtables. We do have certain trainings that we put on for the county as a whole. But I think if employees feel that they're invested in, that they're given an opportunity to grow professionally, and they get that sense of ownership with us as an employer, and we can develop that relationship where they feel valued and they know that there is opportunity, I think that's what's going to really help us in that long-term commitment. And certainly I think I know you were grilling hamburgers with the executive at the Employee Appreciation Night. I think things like that where employees feel that they're not just a name or a number, but that their work has meaning and that it's valued by the community. and knowing that and hearing those things. I think that's really important.
What kind of dollar amount would we be talking?
Incentive.
I don't know, because it's really, I know this year the executive asked all the departments, when we meet with the executive to do our budgets, that is the question he focused on. He asked each one of us, do you have the dollars in your training budget to do the training that you need to do? And so I know that was a focus this year. Now, do we have enough? Could we use more? Could certain departments use more? I don't know. I'm sure the answer is probably yes. But it's to how much and which departments, I don't know
I'd
off the
like
top
to
of
add
my
some
head.
in there. I have to have some type of idea. 20,000, 80,000, 120,000. You know, I have to have something to write. I just can't put that we need more training dollars and leave a zero.
If you would allow me to take a look over the next couple of days as you're working on the budget process, and I'll get you a number. Is that all right?
That'd be fine. Thank you.
Supervisor Dowling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Supervisor Bender actually kind of alluded a little bit to, I think it'd essentially be the nationwide employee retention. Could you tell me what our employee retention numbers are? Like, do 60% stay, 70% stay after being hired?
I'd have to, we provide P&F numbers every month as far as hires and number of employees that have left. Off the top of my head, if you look solely at the number hired versus the number left, we're running pretty much the same, close to the same number that we hire each year is about the number that are leaving.
Okay, thank you.
Supervisor Flom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mark. I got a question. It's kind of a two-pronged question
Sure.
about the budget and how it relates to the wage study. Does this set us up well, in your opinion, for a good kind of seamless implementation of the wage study once it's complete?
I don't know, because right now I don't know what's going to come through as a recommendation. I can tell you that the numbers, the 3% lift to the compensation schedule and the planned 4%, that's already baked into all these numbers. So there's no additional monies to reach those two goals.
Sure.
I'm sure we'll have obviously some recommendations how to address pay and get closer to market or at market.
Okay.
But what that actually cost will be, I have no idea at this point.
Okay. And the second part, I may need to talk with you separately about this, but it's about the wage study itself. I'm just a little worried that we may end up breaking the bank to try to increase employee retention. I mean, I'm all for trying to do our best to retain the people that we have, but I don't want to try to, go above market or, at a point where it's just not financially feasible. So I guess in your mind, that if you don't think this is germane right now, you can follow up with me later. In your mind, do you think that the wage study will be feasible, or will it need to be tinkered with when we get the results back?
Based on what I saw the last time, and I wasn't in human resources at the time the last study was done, but I know there was a variety of recommendations. Some were implemented, some weren't, some were partially implemented. I would assume that we're going to have a similar choice that the board's going to have. Which ones are we going to focus on? Which ones might be this is a great idea, but we need to wait, or it might be a wish list. I think with the challenge we have right now, it's really twofold. One, it's on the recruitment standpoint. We need to hire good quality employees to do the important jobs and provide the services that the county prides itself in. But then we also have to balance that with retention. And if we focus all the dollars on increasing that initial wage, that could create some issues on the retention side. But on the flip side, if we focus on retention, those are hopefully employees that we'll keep, that won't leave, but it's not going to help us on their recruitment. So I think that's really going to be the fine balance that we're going to have to look at when we address that.
And then I guess one final follow-up. In your mind, what do you think is the more important thing right now? We hired 144 people last year. Is it recruitment or retention? I mean, in your experience, where do you think that, these dollars are going to be best appropriated to in the future?
I think it's really two sides of the same coin.
Okay.
But right now, we have to have people at Parkview to care for the residents. We have to have people to plow the roads come winter. We have to have people that can fix the equipment to keep those plows on the road. We have to have staff running the county jail or patrolling the roads. We need, it's really not an either or, but if I could hire a ton of qualified people today, that's the one I would take right now at this moment.
Yeah. All right, thank you for your insights. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few questions. What would be, and sorry if I missed this in the book there, what is the average age of a county employee right now?
I don't know that we keep that statistic.
Okay, that might be a good one to keep as far as looking to the next 10, 20 years here. Oh, you have it?
We look at it for the health insurance plan. So that's not exactly the statistic for employees, but it's about 46 is the average age of an employee on our health insurance plan.
Okay, thank you for that. And
Thank you for the lifeline.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
You can phone a friend, too.
And then, do you offer an exit survey for folks that are moving on? Or is that something that's going to be incorporated in the wage survey or study?
Every employee that leaves county employment gets sent an employee exit opinion survey. We also, either at the employee's request or supervisor's request, we also will do in-person exit surveys with employees, but everyone has the opportunity to fill out the form and send it back to us. We review all survey responses and we share those with the department that the employee worked for.
And I guess, are you at will to comment on maybe a few of the top reasons that folks are leaving the county employment?
First of all, my disclaimer is it's very individual, obviously. Some people leave because they're moving, their family situation's changed. I mean, there's things that we're not going to be able to compete with. Wages are certainly a concern, but also some people, based on either, if you read studies about this, you'll see that time and time again, one of the biggest reasons people leave employment is either that initial first-line supervisor that they have, or the culture of their team, department, organization. Now, I think as a mission, I don't know that anyone can beat the mission that we have as a county with all our departments, all the services that are provided. But really, what does that look like when you drill down onto each team and how that mission is conveyed to employees, how it's carried out, how that individual supervisor makes their employees feel valued. And when Supervisor Bender asked about training, that's one of the things that I think that we could continue to invest in, is training those frontline supervisors or provide additional training, because that's really where it's at. We can certainly pay people more and they'll appreciate that, and that'll help us compete in the marketplace. But people want to know that the work they do is meaningful, that it's appreciated, and that the people they work with respect and appreciate what they do every day.
Quickly, what department has the best retention?
She left already, but I'd have to say Treasurer's office.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Supervisor Stafford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you.
Yes.
Just a couple questions. Did I hear right, we do not track turn? So we do not know what our turnover rate is?
Well, we track it, but not in a way that I can just give you a number right now.
Okay.
We track every month. We provide our statistics to the Personnel and Finance Committee, new hires who have left, some of the reasons why people have left. But just off the top of my head, I can't give you a number.
Right. So when you supply that information on any sort of incentive, I think we need to understand what
Sure.
our current turn is. Do we also compare it against any sort of industry average cohort through WCA, NACO, SHRM, any other type of organization that might have a good idea? Because we may get a number, but that might be a low or high number depending upon the cohort.
Right, depending on the context.
Right.
Excellent point. And no, I don't think we do at this point. But
Okay.
thank you for that.
And one other question.
Yeah.
What is our response rate for the exit surveys?
It's pretty low, to be honest with you. I think that you've got the employees who really felt valued or enjoyed their work will get those very positive surveys back. And conversely, those who had a poor experience will definitely get those back. Everything in the middle, where it was okay for whatever reason, those are the ones we're probably not capturing as much of. But I would say we get the majority of the extremely satisfied, the 5-star review, and the 1-star review.
Okay, and as a percentage, if you had to guess, how many do we get back?
Oh, as a percentage?
Yeah, just generally.
Oh,
5%, 10%?
I was going to say probably not 10%.
Not 10.
No.
Okay. So it's a low sample. So
It
what
is a
we
low
get, we
sample.
have to be very cautious of leading variables, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We were encouraged to ask our questions of the department heads ahead of time if we had them questions, and it appears to me that a lot of these questions could have been asked ahead of time. So I just encourage people for the next sessions to ask ahead of time. Thank you.
Supervisor Wise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a question. Are we ever looking at a different tact here? We have a problem with getting new employees and keeping new employees. Is it time that we start thinking about looking at another alternative would be to maybe in janitorial supplies or something like that, find somebody who is in the business of janitorial and just hiring them to do the job?
Good question,
You
and
looking at
actually, we have looked at that in certain situations, and Director Elder, who will be up here shortly, when earlier this year, we converted some of his custodial staff to facilities assistant, which, number one, moved those positions to a higher rate of pay. It also gave them some additional responsibility and provided the department greater flexibility in how they could assign those positions out. The challenge that Director Elder found is that, first of all, those outside organizations were having the same recruitment issues we were. So they were having a problem keeping their current clients staffed, much less taking on others. The other challenge that we have specific to facilities, for instance, is that there are certain requirements that we have depending on the building that's being worked in that are outside of county control. So for instance, there are CGIS background requirements that the federal government sets. And so an employee who works within the county administration building, because of the systems that IT has, we have to have certain backgrounds done. Same thing, anyone working at the sheriff's office has to have certain backgrounds done. Even out at the Coghlan building, because the Department of Ag is out there, we have different requirements as well. That adds a whole nother layer to, we can't just hire a company. Now, we could hire them or try to hire them given all these extra requirements then that they would have to meet. But when we looked at it, we weren't able to find a vendor that could do that for us.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Did you have some more?
If I could just real quick,
Yes.
if I could move on to page 161, that is the self-funded health insurance. The question came up before, so I just want to highlight that Winnebago County does have a self-funded health insurance fund where premiums are paid by departments and employees that go into that fund. And we do have, I guess there's a few facts I just want to explain very briefly. Right now, if an employee elects to be covered by our health insurance, the county pays 88% of that monthly premium. It's a great benefit that employees have. That's if they complete an annual health risk assessment. If an employee chooses not to complete that for whatever reason, there's a 5% difference where the county then pays 83% of the monthly premium. Our fund balance had been determined to be higher than necessary. So for this year, we are applying about $917,000 in fund balance to this account. And also noteworthy, we've shifted some of the labor costs of the payroll and benefits manager in the Human Resources Office, as well as some of my time specifically to this budget. And that's where some of the labor savings then in the HR budget come from to provide for that HR generalist position. We thought that was appropriate based on the amount of time that these positions work with health insurance specifically to cost share some of that. I will point out, certainly don't have to turn to it, but on page 45, it does list the self-funded health insurance, and we are projecting, even after applying that $917,000, we are projecting that we would still have a balance of just over $4.2 million in that fund. So to answer preemptively the question as far as what type of fund balance do we need, we really don't have something set, but this is the third year in a row that we've provided no increase on health insurance premiums to either employees or to departments. And then part of that philosophy with that employee wellness clinic is to focus on good quality health care where we can control the cost and also hopefully provide some savings to the health plan. And then also, then if you turn to page 167.
We've got a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Supervisor Bender.
Just if you could, you know, you always hear like McDonald's advertising 1625, but doesn't have health insurance. What are our plans for a single, a double, and a family? What are they, you know, a single's probably 900 something, family's 2,000, but just so everybody on this board knows what health insurance actually costs. And when McDonald's is paying 1625 and we're paying 1625, they're not paying for health insurance.
Right. So this is the county cost, and keep in mind the employee would pay either 12 or 17% of this. But the county cost for a single plan is $825.44 per month. A double plan is $1,638.37. And a family plan is just under $2,200. It's $2,169.89. And then also, because Mike had spoken about stop-loss insurance before regarding workman's comp, we also have stop-loss insurance for the health insurance plan. We have a $300,000 limit to protect the county.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, then moving ahead finally to the self-funded dental insurance on page 167. We also, in addition to the medical insurance, have a self-funded dental insurance. We estimate that, again, we're not increasing the rates for this. I believe we've kept the rates stable since 2017, and we're expecting a surplus of about $10,000. And again, I'll just refer back to page 45, our fund projection for the end of 2023 would be $792,204, which is an amount that we're comfortable with. Any other questions?
Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A surplus of 10,000, when some major dental stuff can cost upwards of $4,000, you could wipe that out pretty quickly, that $10,000. Is that the right number, 10,623?
That is, but keep in mind that we do have a fund balance of almost $800,000.
Oh.
That 10,000 is just for this next year, 2023.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask if you could talk a little bit about how the cost for both the self-funded health and dental insurance is sort of adjusting out after 2020. Understandably, we had like lower expenses that year. People probably delayed health care or dental care. And one thing I think we've heard is generally that more, then people have kind of caught up. They've gone to get those things that they delayed. And so have you noticed any of that? And as we move to the future, is this, sort of like 18 million-ish on expenses sort of more than norm? Or is some of that going to decay as people maybe catch up on things?
I would say it's in line with what we've had in previous years. We definitely saw a change because of COVID. We're in the process of doing our employee benefits meetings, and one of the statistics we shared was related to dental health. And we've got roughly a quarter of our eligible employees have not taken advantage of the free preventative cleanings. And obviously, there's statistics about good oral hygiene leading to, good overall health and things like that. So will we see an increase of issues from people not having gone to the doctor as often? We could. I mean, it's really hard to predict, but obviously we do work with our third-party administrator as far as coming up with some of those estimates, and overall it's been pretty stable the last several years.
And so, like, if I look at, obviously just a snapshot and a bad snapshot, but 2020 to 2023 has significant jumps, that is more anomaly than a linear trend that you are projecting into the future.
Yes, but I guess I would say too that every year is an unknown and it's a risk, obviously, which is why we do that stop loss insurance. One of the benefits we have as an employer is the number of employees we have. I mean, certainly the more employees we have, the odds are we'll incur some of those high expenses, but we're also spreading those expenses out. So there are years that we do see significant expenses and other years where we don't.
Thank you. Then my last question is just related to holding those costs down. So you mentioned being able to apply the funds keeps the employee share from increasing. Can you talk about how that impacts the hiring or retention, or if it doesn't, that's okay too?
I think it may help with retention a little bit, because obviously if you're an employee and you realize you haven't increased costs year over year, that stands out. It's a little bit more challenging to explain that in a bite size. Why should you work here? Elevator pitch to a prospective employee. But I've been here long enough where a certain percentage increase was the norm. As an employee, you just expected that. And to go as long as we have without having that, I think has been, pretty amazing.
I would absolutely agree. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And I see no other questions, so I thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next is Facility and Property Management, Mike Elder. Yes.
Still under administration.
Oh, I'm sorry. I seen her back in there. I was wondering what she was waiting for. But Page 183. Sorry about that, Patty. Yes. Okay. Okay, just, we can ask it if you wanted. Mark, we have one last question for you here.
It was a quick question. With the survey coming out of where they're doing the study on how income is going to be and all that, what it's
Yes,
going to be. And I know we have X amount for the 4% for everybody, and now we have another contingent in case. What if that study comes back and says we're way off, and we're going to have the benefits, everything is going to change by lots of money? You've already given people 4%, which is exciting, but now it says we're way off. I'm just asking, how would you deal with that, or what is the plan for that?
That's going to be something that we'll obviously, as a group, have to talk about, prioritize, determine what the priority is and what the plan is moving forward. Now, certainly, the executive, Mike, myself, we certainly may have an opinion and some recommendations along with the consultant, but ultimately, from my perspective, it's about providing, number one, that information to this body, and then number two, determining what you guys would support and what you see as the priority.
Okay, Because from the last one they had a few years back, it seems like when you ask people, it says, there was a study there, but nothing really happened. And, I'm just worried what's gonna happen here, because there's so much pressure on this. From every place in committee I go to is like, this study, we need to know the study, we're losing employees, we need this. This is really important, this study, and it's gonna make a bigger impact, I think, on everything, that we just can't forget it and think that 1.9 is gonna cover it, because I think, from what I'm hearing, people leaving, going somewhere else is because of a lot of change in money. I don't see a lot of people coming here, they're going elsewhere, so that's what I'm worried about, is we're gonna be back here talking about a lot more money than we're talking now, so that's all.
And my understanding was the last study that was done, nothing had been set aside to address any recommendations, where a 1.9 may or may not come close to what we need, but it's certainly more than what we had the last time. And the other thing is that I've been stressing to departments too, is that while my office is certainly spearheading this project, this is not a study that Human Resources is doing for the departments. This really needs to be a collective effort of departments working with the consultant, having those conversations, explaining their priorities. So whether we agree or disagree with recommendations, I really think it's important that the departments have a voice in this process, that this isn't something that Human Resources is doing, it's something that we're coordinating for all departments.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
Supervisor Cox.
Where did I get the idea that we are setting aside like $2 million for the wage study to end and we'd be able to fund what we needed to fund? I think I may have heard it during a meeting with Mike involved. Did you not say something about a $2 million set aside for the wage study to end?
Yes, the current budget has a $2 million contingency fund included in the budget, because any changes we make will have to be funded on an ongoing basis. So it's in the current executive budget as a $2 million contingency fund. That means we've reserved that budget room to actually spend that money. Of course, it'll have to be allocated to departments, so there would be future board action needed following the study. But I would say $2 million is a very significant allocation to implement those results. And just by way of illustration, and Mark wasn't involved when we did the last pay study, but the last pay study found one of the biggest findings was our minimums were considerably too low, our starting wages. And so they recommended new minimums. I only had about $250,000 a year I could use to implement that. That's what I was given. So just to bring people up to the recommended minimums took a 3-year process, which all folded into merit pay and was very complicated. But it took 3 years just to get people up to minimums, and even then we had no money available to do anything for people who were maybe the victims of salary compression caused by bringing up the higher minimums, so we just had to let that kind of work out through the merit pay increases. So the $2 million looks real good to me, given I was only given a budget of $250,000 a year for those increases last time we did the pay study. It's certainly possible the recommendations will come in higher than that, and then we're back to the drawing board. But I think we've made a very good start in reserving that $2 million.
Supervisor Bender.
Just a comment, we're one of the few counties that don't have a 0.5% sales tax. That would generate $16.5 million. I think we have to take care of our employees, and when that wage study comes back, we have to bring them up to a competitive wage. We cannot continue to have 20% of our employees leaving every year. And if we have to, I voted no for the sales tax the last 2 times. But if that's what it takes to pay our employees and get our nursing home back up to, basically, we have 165 residents, I'd like to see 155 or 60 in that nursing home. We need a highway department that's ready to plow snow. We're missing like 10 people there. We have to take care of the employees if we want to take care of the public. And I think everybody that's on that road, when they're slipping this winter because there's no salt and the roads are covered in ice, they're not going to be happy. So, whatever we have to do when the wage study comes back, if we have to bring that sales tax back forward and basically take care of the employees in order to keep them, I would be for that.
Good job. Thank you. Now, Patty.
All right, good evening. We're getting close.
Page 183.
So information technology is a service department to maintain, build, support all of the technology, hardware and software throughout the county. And we are responsible for two different funds. One is our actual operational budget, and the other is the technology replacement fund. We did meet the target levy goals that we were given. However, one item that will stand out in the operational budget is a $50,000 increase to our professional services account. That started out as a request for a position for an electronic documents coordinator. For years, departments have really been discussing the desire to evolve to a more paperless environment. And we submitted a request, an ad request for our budget for a position to try to make that happen. It was denied, but we were given the one-time $50,000 to determine the best plan, I guess, to work with a consultant and see if what we have is sufficient to go forward and try to get a lot more paperless happening throughout the departments. So that is one piece that pushed us over our goal. But again, it was going to be a position, and it was denied and put in as professional services. Otherwise, the vast majority of my operational budget is the people. There's pretty small amount in addition to that in that account. And then the technology replacement fund is based on the inventory of everything throughout the county. Everything that makes the infrastructure that all works together, to the devices that sit on everyone's desk, to the laptops they can be mobile with. We give an age to all of those items, and they come up throughout the years, and that's what we ask to spend each year. That, and in addition, the actual Microsoft licensing cost, which is very big. And that is the purpose of this account. It started in 2000, and its purpose was to try to smooth out the levy limit request, because we'd have big spikes when the licensing was due or when a large group of hardware had to be replaced. So it's been operating that way for a long time. We are adjusting it this year, I guess, to happen a little bit differently. So the number you see in the book this year probably isn't consistent with what you've seen as a trend in the last few years. But we are still going to try to maintain a smooth target levy request each year. So we're just coming at it a little different way. And it will also have us budget more exactly, what's happening that year. So I guess I'll open it for questions.
Supervisor Cox.
How far down the road do you look for your replacement plan? In other words, you go 5 years, you go 10 years, you go 3 years? How do you look that up?
We have a large spreadsheet that we can project it out for as many years as we want, really. We probably always look at 20, which is a little bit ridiculous in the IT industry because pricing and equipment changes so quickly, but that gives us the idea of trends, but we definitely keep it closer to what we're spending this year and the next couple of years as far as any kind of real numbers. But we have the trend we can project it out 20 plus years if we want.
Supervisor Hanson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have you touched on it and sparked an interest. So I'm looking at your contractual services, line 55014. Could you just please explain again for me the jump in professional services? You touched on that just a second ago, and now you've sparked my interest. Explain why that jump was?
Sure. So again, we came in with a level levy request equal to last year, so no increase. And then we did an ad request for a position for an electronic documents coordinator. That was denied, but we were allowed this $50,000 one-time amount
in our professional services to address how we can make a plan of attack to be more paperless. So that is what that came from. Does that help, or?
Supervisor Schellinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is the, I guess if you could talk a little bit more about like what you hope that $50,000 does, and I think in my mind I've heard two things when it comes to sort of the paperless objectives of the county. One is to reduce the cost of buying paper, printing stuff, mailing it, whatever, and then the other is to improve the efficiency of the operations, the departments, the equipment and stuff we have. Could you talk a little bit about how those two things would be addressed by the $50,000, and then related kind of, I know that it sounds like the objectives is to find out what we need to do, but if the initial request was for a position, is that still probably what we're going to need to fund in the future?
So with the 50,000, what we envision is we do have in-house software for imaging. We are already assisting multiple departments in being more paperless. So it's just very time consuming, very time consuming for one of my staff and the department, because we have to work together on the logic of how to store everything, how do you envision calling this data back and all of that. So we probably will work with a consultant to review what we have and see if it's the best solution, if they would recommend a different solution, and then see if we can get any time out of it, probably for the high-end logic end, not the manual scanning of everything. So yeah, I mean, eventually if we want to really make progress in a quicker fashion, we would need a body to help it out.
Thank you.
Supervisor Norton.
Thank you. With that consultant, if you get it in the budget passed, when do you think you'll get, recommendations? When do you expect them by, may I ask?
I'm not sure if we have a timeline thought out yet. We would probably have to do some requests for, proposal or quote.
Okay. Second question, I guess going totally paperless, are there other costs that we involved that we haven't thought of that, may replace the paper costs and the cost for the storage of the paper, of the items? Have you thought about that?
There probably will be other costs that kind of offset, but there will be the soft costs of all of the time savings and the convenience for the other departments. I can use Mary Ann Miller maybe as an example. Instead of having to haul a dolly full of boxes of paper into a courtroom, they can have it all at their fingertips if it's paperless.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Supervisor Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you tell me what the cost of these iPads was roughly?
Probably $400-ish. Each.
So times 36. Okay. If you go paperless and we no longer get our packages in the mail, that's the objective?
Well, that could be part of it, but that's not the objective.
I don't really care if you do that. My only suggestion is that with these small screen laptops that we have here, these iPads, we can't see what we're reading on these things unless we zoom them out. And the open meeting software package that you have doesn't allow for a split screen. So we'd be toggling back and forth between our open meeting software and the agenda. Every time we wanted to, look at what we have on our desk.
Sure.
Right now. So can we get, 24-inch laptops so that we can read what we're looking at?
Do you want a budget for that, Chairman Egan?
Oh, you just said it's in your budget.
That's my only concern with going fully paperless here is that You know, I hate to admit it, but I'm becoming a senior citizen myself, much as I'd like to believe otherwise. And my eyesight is starting to go. So, you know, I guess that's my concern of going fully paperless here is can we be accommodated as a board with equipment that's going to allow us to be able to do our jobs properly?
I can take note of that, or it would definitely be a budget thing as we move forward.
Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to have to agree with Supervisor Swan. These are hard to read for those of us who are of a certain age. And those supervisors who really want to go completely electronic and receive no more paper mailings, then let them do that. And those who want to receive a paper mailing, much as I like to save some trees, I can't read them. And those of us who want paper, then mail out those packets. So it seems like you could make everybody happy if you let those who want electronic get fully electronic, those who want paper get the paper. Thank you.
Thank you. I just have one thing, and it's not really to do about your budget, but it is. He said that these iPads cost right around $400. I don't think there's even anything on our records, like say if someone wrecks one or loses one or whatever. There's nothing on any of our records to have it replaced or by who. I would hope that IT committee that's listening, that they would go ahead and work on this and put something into place here so that gets taken care of, because otherwise it's going to be money out of all of our pockets, just so you know. Supervisor Swan.
And just one follow-up comment quickly. If we do get those large laptops, could I please ask that we also get Microsoft Word and Excel?
Supervisor Dowling.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a comment, not necessarily a question, but there are other departments that have already implemented scanning in their documents. So just so that everyone here is aware of that. It's not just, obviously, corporate counsel and everyone else. So I'm assuming that's why the position was denied, because there's already different departments doing this on their own. So, thank you.
Okay, I see no other questions, so I thank you much.
Thank you.
And now we'll have the Facilities and Property Management with Mike Elder. That starts on page 197.
Good evening. Mike Elder, Facilities Director, and I'm here to talk to you about our budget. And the Facilities Department has grown immensely in the 24 years I've been here. We basically just started out as the maintenance department, and now we are actually doing what's considered facilities management. We're one of the mid-sized departments. We've got 39 people. Half of that is roughly the cleaning staff. The other half are the staff that actually does the physical repairs of the building. And part of that staff is we've got 7 maintenance technicians, 2 HVAC technicians, 2 master electricians and a master plumber, a carpenter and a painter. So we are kind of a full-service department that we can do the majority of the work in-house and take care of the departments we support in a relatively quick manner. In the past, I think I've told you, we've got over 100 buildings, and the facilities department is growing and in our areas of responsibility, but we really only take care of 17 of those buildings. We take care of 14 major buildings, and we take care of 3 radio transmitter sites. The rest of the buildings are still under the care and management of the other departments, like the airport, highway, solid waste, and parks takes care of their own buildings. We assist them when they need help, but for the general maintenance and fixing up some of their stuff, their staff takes care of it. The facilities department has 3 divisions. It's not really apparent in the budget because everything gets rolled up, but we have our building maintenance department, which has the vast majority of our budget. And in that division, we take care of paying for the utilities, paying for the repairs to the various systems in the buildings, and cleaning the buildings. We have another division that we now call the 980 division, which we have a trailer out there on Highway Y that we are now being the landlords for the 980 offenders that are released to the county's care. And as you know, we've got a capital project now that's going to increase the number of units we have out there by up to 6. You were gracious enough to grant us $1 million to get that done. The one trailer that we have out there costs roughly $250,000 to get it put out there. And then the final division we've got is the division that we consolidate all of our costs for the remodeling projects that the departments ask for us, that are over and above what's necessary to keep the buildings operational. And this year we've only got 2 of them. Human Services had some office remodeling that they wanted, and Branch 3 needs their chambers remodeled. With the staff that we've got, you know, one of the statistics, you know, Mark talked about 144 jobs or positions that we filled. We, on an annual basis, complete between 8,000 and 11,000 work orders a year. So, you know, if you take a look at that, well, we only work 280 days, 208 days. We're handling close to 100 work orders a day with 39 people, of which, you know, the custodial people really don't do work orders. If you go back to, we start on page 197, but if you go to 198, we have what we've hoping to accomplish and get finished this year. And then next year we have what we're planning on trying to get done in the coming year. We don't really have a whole lot of fancy things that we do. Our budget goes up and down based on what the needs of the different departments are, how we try to take care of them. So one year you might see, you know, building maintenance go up because we've got some problems that we need to take care of, and once we take care of them, they go away for the next year. I guess, you know, I'll open it up to questions for you guys, because it might be easier for me to answer your specific questions than trying to go through and explain everything line by line that we do.
Supervisor Eisen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Elder, how much inconvenience would it be to add the installation of the emergency generator at the exposition center to the budget by amendment?
Well, that is right now being planned on being put in the capital improvement plan.
Okay,
So
it's not in your goals for 2023, and my fear comes from the note in the budget on page 557, note number 2, which states that many of the projects will not likely move forward. In other words, all projects that were listed, projects will not go forward. We experienced a slow replacement of the emergency management mobile command post, which failed to perform in the winter Highway 41 crash of 100 cars. The Expo Center is a disaster recovery site, and it's served a pivotal use in the COVID-19 pandemic. So I would ask if that's something that is workable.
it's workable, but I think what it needs to be is compared with all of the other capital projects that we've got. Now, that I do know is we've got plans for coming forward to you and showing you all of the capital projects in the January, February timeframe. And then based on the debate and how the county board feels to approve it, those projects would be approved, and then they would move forward. So it would be accomplished hopefully in 2023, or how the priorities work out for that. Not necessarily in my budget. It wasn't in my budget because it's a joint effort between parks, emergency management, information systems, facilities. So it's not really a one department type project. It would be, it's more suited for the capital improvement plan.
Thank you.
Supervisor Hens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was just wondering, because after our tour that we did last year, the eye-opening experience that we all had out at the Highway Department, is there anything in the near future as far as a study or an audit or something of that like on the longevity, the improvements, repairs, or possible replacement of buildings that are involved in the county?
I'm asking my committee to bring forward an amendment for a building condition assessment, which would take a look at, I've got a list of 114 different buildings. It is something that goes across multiple departments again. So to put it into my department solely, it's kind of like not just solely my responsibility, it's everybody's. And then it's also a real policy discussion that you all would need to make, because it's kind of upending the way we've done building projects in the past. In the past, I've got my 14 buildings, I have projects I want to bring forward. There's been no real consolidated or coordinated effort between all of the different departments to bring the projects forward. So in the past, I would have been like limited to $5 million for capital improvements. Parks would be limited to $2 million. And we'd just be bringing forward projects without a real coordinated look at how it is really going to fit into the long-range needs of what the county is, and whether my project is more important than a highway project, or is more important than an airport project, or parks. So it's really a broad thing and not just my department. So that's a long answer to your question. Okay. Yes, there is. Second part of that is I'm already working with Bob Damel. We are looking at coming forward with a capital project in the capital plan for making improvements to the highway shop.
Okay, and I just want to say I look really forward to seeing that. And like I said, what we've been doing in the past obviously wasn't working from what we saw. So trying to be more proactive instead of reactive, I think, is the way we need to go in the future. Thank you very much.
Supervisor Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we get reimbursed from the state for the work you do on the courtrooms?
That is a question I'm not qualified to answer. I know the state pays for the courts, and there's a revenue that comes to the county somehow. My department does not directly get reimbursed by what we do for the courts.
Okay, can I ask who gets that and how? I'm asking because I heard, listening to the last Project Village Committee meeting, and you kind of discussed this, and I'm just curious, you know, when the state mandates something on the court system and we have to put someone in and you have to do it, do we get reimbursed? Or when a judge wants a certain thing, I mean, do we get reimbursed for doing that work for them? Or let's say, probably won't happen, I mean, because we have a secure courtroom, but let's say someone destroys part of this, any of the courtrooms, do we get reimbursed? Because it's, you know, it is a state function, a state courtroom, a state employee, state judge, and I guess I would like to know, do we get reimbursed? And if we do, and you say we do, where does that go? I'm just curious.
Mr. Collard?
I'll give it a try. I think the answer is basically no, that we don't get reimbursed. We do get some forms of revenue from the state, starting with shared revenue. I mean, if you were asked some people at the state, they would say our shared revenue, you know, we get a couple $1 million a year state shared revenue. One of the original intentions of that program was to compensate the county, well, for several things, but one of which was for providing support to the court system. But on the other hand, this has been the subject of much controversy and debate when county people meet versus when state people meet to talk about it. And I know I've seen in the past, things such as charts showing what percentage of court-related expenses are county paid now compared to state paid now, and then looking at that, how that has changed over time. So when the current system was adopted in the 1980s, the state was still paying 80% of the cost of operating the courts. 10 years ago, it had passed to 50-50. When you looked statewide at all the county court systems, not just focusing on Winnebago County. So, there are some other revenue streams that, you might point to and say they're court-related, such as some elements of the fees that the clerk of courts receives. But on the other hand, we don't have the opportunity to just send the state a bill saying it cost us this much extra, send us some more money. No, that doesn't happen.
So when a judge or a court needs, refurbishing, or we do it, and I mean, we have to make it a priority, or right? I guess, and that's where I've struggled. A couple of years ago when we changed, the courthouse and the way it was looked, and we had to put some courts over here, and we had to do something. Yeah, that's our cost because that's our decision. But I guess I would be interested in pursuing getting some of these costs back, because, like I say, anything could happen in this courtroom, and we have to pay for it, and we're not directly responsible. Thank you for the answer, Mike.
There's a second part to it. You were talking about if somebody would damage the courts.
Yes.
If there's an individual that we can identify,
Okay.
they are usually charged with the crime, and then we go forward and try and get restitution.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Elder.
Supervisor Depperding.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Page 208, I see that snow removal is listed twice there. Object of 55003 and 75003. Could you help me explain why it's listed twice? And I also noticed that 55003 kind of jumped by about 50 grand. Where did that come from?
We have, if you take a look at the way we do the different accounts, if an account starts with 5,500 or 55, that's contracted services. If it starts with a 75 or a 7, that's usually what we are charged interdepartment with other departments doing work for us. Okay, now this year has been unique in that both my staff and the highway staff has been hit pretty hard with vacancies. And at the time of the development of the budget, I had a plan on how we're going to do snow removal. And if highways can support us, then highways would be doing the work. And if highways can't, then I would have to contract out for snow removal. I haven't filled my snow removal crews yet, so I am having to contract out for doing sidewalks and some of the smaller parking lots that highways couldn't do. And highways is still suffering from lack of equipment. Their orders for new trucks have been cut back from the manufacturers, and they also have some shortages in equipment operators. So I have to contract for doing the parking lots. So we're in this area now where we can't support the basic services that we can with the staff that we have, so we're having to have funding available to go out and get contracted services.
So this is something in particular for 2023. This wasn't a problem in 2022?
No, and in I'm burning out my people doing snow removal. And if I keep them doing snow removal, they will just find a different job where they can just be custodians, and then I have an even bigger problem. So last year was the big eye-opener with residual COVID problems, lack of staff, and snow. And I'm going to have to, in order to keep my employees from being burned out, I have to contract out.
And that extra 50K, that's just kind of like, was this from like bids that you've actually got?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
I've got bids now.
How many bids?
We had 2 bidders, and one bidder would not do the sidewalks, and the other bidder would do the parking lots and the sidewalks.
Okay. And one other question to page 207. In regards to maintenance equipment, object 54022, I see that the cost just kind of fluctuates from year to year. Could you explain where that 370K come from? What's like the main driver? I mean, you don't necessarily have to get into the weeds or anything like that.
The main driver is, as the buildings are getting older, some equipment needs to be replaced. Some years we've had money budgeted, but we've had bigger problems crop up, more equipment that we had to fix. So the dollar amounts that you're seeing in previous years are actually what's been expended, not necessarily what we had planned that year. So this year, we know that you can't get, up until this year, we used to be able to get R22. We've had some problems with R22 equipment now, and basically R22 is extremely expensive or not available. So we've got numerous R22 air conditioning plants that we have to replace. So that's one of the big drivers that we've got. The other one is just buildings are getting older, they're getting used harder, and we're having equipment just break.
Okay. I guess, sometime, maybe not this week, but like, after the budget, if you could send me a list of like some of the equipment that's, that you're expecting to replace, I'd just like to take a look at that.
Well, here, I can tell you real quick right now.
Oh, even better.
Please bear with me.
I think I have it here, Mike, if you can find it.
I've got a much more,
Okay.
I got the detailed list.
I have the detail in Munis. It's
Oh,
pretty good.
okay, I've got it here now. Like at the Otter Street building, we have to repair the venting for the boilers. We're estimating about $50,000 for that. We've got the building automation system at the jail that is an old generation, and everybody knows what technology happens. We have to upgrade what they call the drivers or the engines for that, and that's roughly $32,000. We need to replace the air handler for master control, $7,200. We have to replace some of the HVAC equipment out at Sandpit Tower, that's $9,600. We have an alarm panel at the jail to replace for $2,300. A cooling tower feed system. You have to treat the water in cooling towers just like you do pools. That's $2,500. We've got a UPS out at the jail tower that's going to cost us $35,000 to replace. Another UPS that's going to cost us about $52,000 to replace. These all have a limited lifespan, and then as you get they also condition the power. So if you have a lightning strike or something nearby where they call it the dirty power that comes in on the utility line, that hits these things and they suffer only so many hits and then they start giving you problems. We have the boiler feed system for the courthouse boilers, a water softener. We're looking at putting some security cameras outside of the Otter Street building, and we have to do some condensate pump work at the jail.
Okay, that's good. I mean, that's good to that we at least have like a list of all of these. Just to help me out, as a supervisor, just so that I'm examining this appropriately. I'd still like you to send me this email with this list.
I'll do that, sure.
Thank you.
Supervisor Bender.
Do you feel the highway department, the maintenance should be under facilities for as far as maintenance? They got rid of their janitor watchman, they had 4 of them about 3 or 4 years ago, and that building has just deteriorated. They have nobody to maintain that building. I mean, that's basically when they built that, you took the old highway shop, and right now, the old highway shop is in better shape than the new highway shop. So basically, facilities maintain that building, they put a roof on it, they put windows on it, you know, they refurbished the parking lot, and now that building is better shape than the brand-new highway department we built. You know, when we remodel this, they still have nobody to maintain it. So I can't see us putting another 10 or 15 million dollars in a building when we don't have anybody there to take care of it. So do you feel that we should add a few people to your budget at that time, and that should come under facilities, just like you were talking about doing the sheriff's department? I mean, we're talking a major investment of 10 to 15 million dollars, and we have truck operators. They're not janitor, watchmen, they're there to basically do construction work on roads. They're not building maintenance people. You know, I just can't see the taxpayers spending more money on another nice building that in 25 years, you look at that cold storage, it's all full of black mold on the outside. It's just disgusting. You know, why we wouldn't have somebody over there at least power washing it and sealing it. But do you believe that you should probably take that over and when we make a big investment like that?
You're asking somebody who's got a vested interest in buildings and who buildings their passion, okay? To answer your question, I think the work that the county does should be focused with the departments that's their specialty. You know, buildings are my specialty, my people's specialty. So to answer your question in a short way, yeah, I think it should be under our arm. Just like asphalt should be under highways. They know asphalt. You know, and turf maintenance should be under maybe parks because they should know turf maintenance. That's something that we're working towards. It's going to take a lot of change. There's a lot of inertia in the county that we have to overcome to make it work, where you know, a lot of people, you know, if we had the night watchmen, they'd be saying, well, you're trying to take my work away from me. And, you know, we got to overcome that. We're slowly getting there. The departments are much more cooperative. When I first came here, you know, we were person non grata in other departments because they didn't want us to see what they were doing. But we've developed a great working relationship now with highways, and I'm sure as it moves forward, we'll be more involved in what goes on.
Yeah, they eliminated the night watchmen, so they don't have them no more. You know, there's nobody there to maintain that building. You know, they were there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And when there wasn't something for them to do, like the sheriff's department would call for a sign or an accident for cleanup, they'd go out and do that. But their other job was just basically building maintenance. You know, they would have somebody in there that would help them. They're gone. There's nobody taking care of that building, and you can tell it shows. You know, so it's like if we make an investment of rebuilding that, we need to have assurance that it's going to be well maintained.
I'm sure that Bob and myself and the county executive will be talking about that. To just add on 3 people into my table of organization right now, I can't fill the positions now. So you would give me 3 more positions and I'd be 8 people behind trying to fill it. So it's a bigger deal, and we're working on trying to get it accomplished. I think, you know, you might all, maybe not all of you were here when we opened up the airport. The airport wanted us to take over cleaning and maintenance of the building, but I can't handle it with the staff I've got. So it's a double-edged sword. We're having trouble recruiting the people, and I don't know a good solution to it, other than I know we're working together as departments much more than we have in the past.
Thank you.
Supervisor Challenger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question is about the increases to contracted services. Is there a corresponding decrease somewhere else in the budget to whoever we would have paid that money to?
Yes, there is. I can't point it all out to you right now because basically what we get is my budget was 0 this year. So any accounts that increased were offset by decreases in other accounts.
I see that your labor budget has increased. So I would be curious where that shows up. It seems to me like we're just adding money to the contractual services, and we aren't. It doesn't look to me like we're taking something away. Maybe I'm wrong, and somebody else wants to chime in and show me where that is. It does look like we've added the wage turnover savings, which maybe accounts for some of that, because I think I understand that maybe part of the reason why we need to contract out is because we just don't have the staff ourselves. But part of it is that it's not the core function of the work your employees are hired to do. Is that last part correct? Like the snow removal is not the core part of why your staff is hired?
It has been the core part. For as long as I've been here, we've done the snow removal. Part of the reason why the wages are going up, the labor's going up, is just because wages are going up. We haven't added people, and we haven't added benefits to them.
Okay, I mean, I'm fully supportive. I think that, like, the idea that this is work that has to get done and we are not getting it done means we have to find something else. I know at the airport we've discussed, and you've discussed with the airport committee, in fact, like what we lose when we contract that out. We sort of don't get the, I'll pick that up or I'll take care of that. I have my county work ethic or my, that sort of thing. And so I think I see this as a larger trend that a lot of departments are experiencing. One that I know last year at the budget time we talked a little bit about in the county board's proceedings. And you've alluded a couple of times to the shortages that you have. I was wondering if you can talk about, over the last year, how that staff shortage has showed up in reduced services or just other things that you haven't been able to get to.
The biggest thing we haven't done is we haven't done floor care. We haven't gone out, we haven't stripped and waxed the floors, we haven't shampooed the carpeting. That's just one thing we haven't done. We've cut back on emptying waste baskets. We've cut back on cleaning some of the windows. We've cut back on vacuuming all the floors. So it's just spread out in small little things all over what we can and can't do.
Thank you. And then what are the challenges you have to getting staffed up?
To get staff in, there's a number of challenges. I'm not so sure that wages are the big thing. It's the type of work we do. It's the type of organization we work for. Working for the government is no longer as looked upon as favorable, I think, as it was 20 or 30 years ago. The benefits that we've had are great, but they've eroded since I started. So people are starting to see that there's not really the advantage to work for government as there was in the past. A lot of times, the problem I've got is my people are on call. A lot of people, I have some people that we've hired who knew through the hiring process that they were on call. They're here for 6-9 months and they say, this on-call stuff really is not fun. But as long as we've got people living in the CBRF, the jail, and Parkview, we have to have people available to take care of the buildings when they have something crop up. So I think that's the biggest challenge I've got, is just the nature of work. People are not going into the maintenance fields. They're not going into the trades. People are looking at, one of the reasons why we changed the title from custodian to facilities assistant is because people don't look at custodians as being a job that they want to aspire to do. So that's my challenges.
Thank you so much.
Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll be quick. Mr. Elder, noticing the accomplishments for 2022 courthouse masonry repairs, and I'm thinking back to a couple of years ago as we were doing the courthouse safety improvements. I commend you and I appreciate that you did everything you could and succeeded in saving the Art Deco faces on the walls. I'm so glad they were saved and that you've done everything you could to work around those pieces of art that we have. Thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Norton.
Thank you. You pay the utilities for how many buildings, and I was curious that you have a decrease of -2 whatever percent, because I thought WPS is having an 8% increase. I know we talked about it in parks. I know the city of Oshkosh has talked about it. I'm just trying to think that through and tell me, yeah.
You are asking a tough question, because I take care of 14 buildings, so I pay the utilities for 14 buildings. But I also pay for parking lot lights. We also pay for some of the other things. And the reason why we've got the decrease is we've been doing energy efficiency stuff in the in our repairs. For instance, I use a program from the Department of Energy called Portfolio Manager, which keeps track of all of our utilities and compares us to across the industry. And you can get the Energy Star rating. It might surprise you to know that the courthouse is our best performing building of all the buildings that I've got. We've managed to reduce the energy consumption of this building by a significant amount. We go through all of our buildings when we do the repairs. We try to find ways to minimize the energy consumption. So that's why we're going down. I've kept trends since I've been here, and the last 5 years, we've really made some reductions.
So, just understanding, you don't pay for the utilities at the Expo Center, correct?
Correct.
Okay, we had a little heated discussion at the last park committee, so maybe, good to know that. Thank you, Mike.
Supervisor Powers.
Sorry, we must have bumped it.
Okay, that's all the lights we have, unless you have anything.
I've got nothing except thank you for whatever support you throw our way. Our employees are doing a great job, not just in facilities, but in all the departments. We're all faced with the challenges of trying to do, the catchphrase is do more with less. And, our staff throughout the county is doing that. And I'd really like to say, like, my staff is doing the best that they can with it. We've added numerous facilities since I've been here, and we haven't really added much staff. We've looked at finding ways to operate more efficiently and get rid of the busy work. And we're getting to the point now where the busy work is pretty much gone, and we're operating as efficiently as we can.
Thank you. Okay, there's no one else back there, so Supervisor Albrecht? Just recess, we can't adjourn. Just recess till 8:30. Just recess till 8:30. We can't adjourn the meeting. Motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Adjourned.